good. Buffering a little bit, but I think we're good. All right. Let's do this. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 98 of the Salvaggio and Cratty Sports Podcast, here for you on a Friday night as opposed to a Wednesday, given the fact that I had to go to a work event on Wednesday night, so we rescheduled. It's our first Friday show, I think, since the winter when I had to record at my uncle's house because we didn't have power at my house.
Right.
So it's been quite some time. So a lot has changed since then. A lot, since then in terms of the larger scope of things, and specifically the last week has changed.
Some for the good, some for the bad.
Across two particular Boston teams that we will get to. But before then, jersey numbers as we narrow down the final jersey number candidates as we approach the hundreds. 2 episodes away. Jason Collins for the Celtics, the lone Celtic. Carl Davis currently wearing it for the Patriots, as you saw in the Twitter picture. If you saw the tweet, the announcement, and Trey Flowers. How could you forget Trey Flowers? Perhaps the most notable, I'd say. Brian, how are we doing? Because we have a show ahead of us. We have quite the show.
Yeah, and I think it's to how I'm doing fitting with what we're going to be talking about, like you said, for the show. As a Celtics fan of me is feeling good right now. Maybe in 2 or 3 hours that might change depending on how things go. But the Bruins fan in me is not feeling great in the slightest. I know this is an episode with what has happened over the last couple of days, what continues to happen that you have been very excited to get to. I can't imagine this is going to be one of the more favorable shows for the Bruins from your standpoint, but we will get to them eventually. Because there is obviously some stuff that has come out with the Celtics, and obviously they are up 2-1 in the NBA Finals. Could potentially be up 3-1 tonight. A lot obviously to get to with them, but for now I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I am excited to talk about certain things with the Bruins, and I am truly dreading them because I am in a point with a team that I've never been at in my life. So
talk about a weird change of emotions going from the Bergeron-Selke announcement to the Cassidy is like the highest of, maybe not the highest of highs, but pretty high up on the list of accomplishments for the season. And then the lowest, literally the lowest of lows when the wrong guy gets canned, and now you have to kind of pick up the pieces, and with still so many questions about this team. Like we've talked about that before, obviously with the Bergeron stuff and the free agents and what is this team going to look like with injuries, because more injuries have come out now. And now you have maybe the worst decision ever for as long as I can remember being a Bruins fan, and firing Bruce Cassidy, which is just going to make things a whole hell of a lot harder for the next guy that comes in and just this team in general moving forward.
Yeah, it's all around tough. You'd be hard pressed to find anything positive. There's just too much going on for my liking.
Yep.
And it's stressful. Like, I had to get up at work, seeing texts and tweets, in passing throughout the workday about what Cassidy was saying, and I had to get up and take a walk because my heart started racing in a bad way. I'm just really not in a good spot with this team, and I've never been in a spot with this team quite like this. So before we get into Bruins stuff, we do have moments of the week as usual. I have to, clue at it because, the dickhead side of things, Don Sweeney, but we'll expand more on things later. But I mean, this came out after the Rangers and Lightning game last night, and that was the fan who sucker punched a Lightning fan after the game. I mean, I've seen people say this in multiple occasions, and you see sucker punches, unfortunately, whether it's fans or players in sports. It's one of the most gutless things you can do. It truly
I would say it's up there. Yeah.
It's just like, it's cowardly. It's you can defend yourself in other ways. Like, it's just brutal. It's one of the more cowardly ways you can do it. This kid is just a complete douchebag. It's so funny because, like, you'd expect this out of like either like adults in their like 40s or 50s, or like kids in their early 20s. This kid's like 29. This kid's in like the dork, like tweener stage of his life where he should have things figured out. But from what I can gather, this guy just doesn't. Because if he's doing shit like this, James Anastasio, 29 years old, of Staten Island, was arrested and charged with 2 counts of assault, 2 counts of disorderly conduct, and 2 counts of harassment. The victim of said sucker punch refused medical attention, so hopefully this means he's okay. This is from Evan Axelbank of Fox 13. And from Liz Crawford of WTSP says, at NYPD News says the Rangers fans James Anastasio, 29, was arrested, Police say he ran away. Witness tried to stop him, and Anastasio punched the witness too.
Jesus Christ! I'm like, when you said the 2 counts, I'm like, where's the? I only saw the video. Part of the video of him, obviously the first sucker punch, because my phone crapped out afterwards. So I didn't know what happened afterwards. But yeah, it was when you said 2 counts, I'm like, I only saw 1 punch, so I don't know if something happened. But
yeah,
I guess that hitting the witness will put that question to bed.
Because the popular video going around, you kind of see like, oh, did this kid just walk away with no repercussions? Because they don't show the whole, like, there was a stanchion in the way.
Yep.
And then there's like obviously people and stuff in the like arena potentially blocking any view they could have had. It kind of seemed like, without knowing, that the kid just walked away unscathed. But apparently he just punched another person, because this guy is just a true Staten Island scumbag. Yep. Not to say all people from Staten Island are scumbags, but just in particular here, this guy's from Staten Island, happens to be a scumbag. One of the more gutless things you can do. It's just so stupid. It's like, it's definitely, I don't know what this guy's like, but it has to just be a heat of the moment thing. Maybe he has some regrets about it, I imagine, unless he's really stupid, given all the charges against him now. It's just I think it was a heat of the moment thing, and the guy's temper got too much of a hold of him, and he did something extremely dumb that's going to change his life for the worse. And like, what a fucking loser. Like, on top of things, what a fucking loser. Like, it's so lame. I don't care what situation your team is in, what team you root for, what's going on around your team, whatever. You don't have to do that. It's not that serious.
There are different ways to handle losses.
Use your words. Clearly this guy might be an idiot, and he might not, be good with words.
He's better.
He might have resorted to a sucker punch.
He's a better fighter than,
I guess.
Wordsmith, I guess.
He did sleep the guy for, what he was trying to accomplish.
Yep.
But like, what a fucking loser. What a fucking loser. It's a tier 5. It's such an easy tier 5. And Don Sweeney, as we'll allude to later, after we get through Celtics and Ryan's moments of the week, which will, factor in some Celtics stuff, is also a tier 5. But yeah, like I said, we will get to that stuff later. So
yeah, mine also factors into the dickhead side of it, because if people have been paying attention on Twitter after the game, game 3, all the stuff that has come out about, obviously, Celtics fans going at Draymond Green, I believe on his podcast, I think today, because the podcasting is a whole nother discussion that we can get into. On if, I know a lot of people have been discussing if that's taking away from his preparation for the NBA Finals, or if he's more focused on jawing at fans and his podcast and, trying to help Golden State win another championship. That's here nor there. I wanted to take the time to just discuss of how much of just giant bitches the Golden State Warriors have been over this whole thing, with Steve Kerr, saying that Boston fans, very classy from them. Klay Thompson going further and saying, that they've played in front of rude fans and dropping F-bombs with children in the crowd. That's really classy. Good job, Boston, was his comment. Draymond Green's wife, Hazel Renee, I'm not even going to go into her whole spiel. Her first post on Instagram, or I think it was a story that she posted out there, kind of crapping on Celtics fans and how, disgusting, or very much disgusting it is. The Celtics fans should be shameful. Again, choosing to focus on, that there's kids in the stands dropping with people dropping F-bombs around. Meanwhile, her husband is dropping swears at the podium with their kid sitting right next to him, but doesn't seem to have a problem with that. Today I saw her on Twitter, I think she posted another story on Instagram where she was dropping F-bombs in the middle of that and saying it was disgusting and classless for Celtics fans to be swearing. So maybe just a look in the mirror is all some people need.
But it's not in the arena though, so it's fine.
Oh, okay, got it. There's no children present, because no kids are gonna go on Twitter and Instagram and see that.
How don't you know that?
They're not. Yep.
You know that? Kids don't have iPhones at like 7 years
technology.
Old,
yeah, she didn't flat out.
Drones, like,
she didn't flat out reference that her son on Twitter was using an NBA burner account, which that kind of caught me a little. I'm like, is her kid using a burner account, or something tells me Draymond might jump on that once in a while. But again, like here nor there. Like,
it's like when your family buys like Netflix for you, like, or for the family, and
you just share the account.
But then like, when mom or dad want to use it, they're like, all right, I'm taking over. Like, fuck off.
This is mine now. Yep.
It's kind of an interesting parallel if you think about it, but
it is. But
so goofy.
I just found the whole thing like, the more I've kind of thought about it, the more I've sat back and listened to more people talk about it. Like, a lot of people I think are, and rightfully so, I think the argument has been like Golden State's kind of letting, or at least Draymond Green is letting this stuff get the better of him. He's claiming he's not, which is another funny angle from it. Like, he's fine with all the trash talking, but everyone else around him seems to be upset by it. So go figure. The thing that came out after the Klay Thompson comments, I forgot that this interaction happened in the NBA Finals. I couldn't remember the whole LeBron James thing when he was walking off the court, and it ended up being a Warriors fan during, I think it was the 16 Finals. That asked him, everybody knows the quote, how's it feel to be a pussy ass bitch? And then the meme came out about the guy being like, hey, watch your mouth, woman.
And then the video of Klay Thompson.
Talking about LeBron's feelings being hurt and something like, so like, it's just a bunch of hypocritical crap.
Stupid. And I feel like it's a situation where you can find something against the Warriors in like any avenue you look at.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. That's what I mean. There's no really defending like this. Again, we've had worse problems with fans, screaming things and, throwing things,
chaining themselves to things and
training themselves and gluing themselves to the floor. Yeah. I was going to say, I wonder if Klay had any problems with that, legitimately disrupting games at the start of the playoffs.
Thompson's going to glue himself to the floor tonight.
Maybe. I can't imagine. I mean, Klay Thompson might not even want to show up if he thought he had a problem with Draymond Green getting cussed out. Now, I'd love to know what Klay Thompson's going to get tonight.
It is going to be brutal for them.
Absolutely. Yep. It's going to be double worse for Draymond, which again, he seems to be fine with. He doesn't really seem to care. Not that he's putting up stat lines
all the time, but he talks about it all the time, so he doesn't care. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do the same thing for Celtics, like, Celtics fans, like, oh yeah, whatever, like Draymond's not in our head, but like in a way that kind of means like he is in your head. But it's
clearly
ways you can look at it.
Clearly his priorities are elsewhere. Again, with all the podcast stuff, I'm watching the pregame stuff now, and Cedric Maxwell is on there discussing it. I don't have the volume on, but the little ticker says they're talking about Draymond Green. But, Draymond Green is going at it with Cedric Maxwell off the court, talking about, who could play and what errors and stuff like that. So clearly his mind is not on the NBA Finals.
It's not. I mean, I personally think Draymond should come on the podcast and talk to us about it. So
you think so? All right.
Open invite, extending.
You can extend that invite, but
to Draymond Green.
I don't know if he's going to want to all the bashing, but I mean,
podcast though.
That's true.
Why wouldn't he?
Yeah, just take the time. But I mean, I just found the whole thing ridiculous. Like I said, the more I thought about it now, it's like I feel like the Warriors, and this is kind of, other people have kind of had this discussion too, is it seems like after how poorly they played in game 3, which we'll get into in a second, just some standout stuff from that game is in general through the first 3, but how poorly they played, obviously they were able to mount a comeback and then kind of collapse late. A lot of people has kind of seen this, and especially with Steve Kerr's comments, not really answering anything or not really owning up to, their failures in game 3 and their shortcomings. Like they kind of more, it seems like, focus on trying to create this narrative of the Boston fan base more so than just answering questions about why they're down 2-1 or, why Draymond Green has as many points as he has fouls in this series, why Klay Thompson has taken 3 games to get going. Steph Curry's kind of been their one and only weapon in this series. So
Andrew
I just
Wiggins
found that
is getting, not cussed out, but like given pep talks by Andre Iguodala.
Yeah, Iguodala is going at him, not really not going at him, but there's a little heated discussion there.
A little bit of a heated prep talk. Or pep talk, not prep talk, excuse me. But this whole thing is just like, it's so dorky, and I've always kind of I've had a lot of respect for Klay Thompson for what he is capable of.
Yep, absolutely.
He's always struck me as kind of a dork. Like he just looks like a dork. He looks like a meme. Like his face,
looks like hair, Squidward's house.
Squidward. Like he looks like a meme, and it's just so corny. It's like something. This whole thing with him in particular is like something you'd see out of a movie, like a very bad movie about like high schoolers, or like something like a crappy college movie or something like something just like
one of those shitty basketball movies. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Like something you'd see in like High School Musical. Like,
that's
so dorky. Like, and I'll clue to it a little later in our, further into our Celtics discussion. It just like, it has me all in on the Celtics just smoking the Warriors the rest of the series.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I was trying to lead this. It's like we talked about this before the finals even started. My whole thing is the Golden State Warriors, them obviously being here and winning finals, and their experience, is that going to reign supreme? And to me, when this stuff kind of comes out and they kind of give off this bitchy nature, and like you said, Klay Thompson especially, like to me, it's gotten the feeling of a team that like they've been here before, so they just felt like they were going to roll into Boston and the Celtics were going to get caught up in, these are the Golden State Warriors. We're playing Steph and Klay, and they've done this before and they've won all these championships. So we're just going to, bow down to them. And this is going to be a cakewalk for the Warriors. And the Celtics so far in 2 out of 3 games, I mean, you could really make the case in game 2, if they didn't have, as drastic of a collapse in the third as they did, that it would have been a closer game. I mean, obviously game 2 was their weaker performance, but like they've, for the most part, been in, I feel like, the majority of these games. The Celtics have not really backed down from anything Golden State has given them, especially in game 3, like I said, with how well the Warriors played again in the third quarter for the Celtics to, jump right back up off the mat and come back and play well. I think Golden State's finally feeling it, that, they're the older team here. Like I said, they have the more experience, but Boston right now, it seems like, and they're playing like the hunger team, or the hungrier team rather. They've been more physical these last couple games, which is something I wanted to see the Celtics do, and they finally did in game 3, which was nice. It kind of just feels like to me that Golden State is kind of feeling the pushback a little bit, and they don't seem to like it, because I think, like I said, it seems like they maybe thought they were going to walk into this series and just the Celtics were going to, just of the aura of the Golden State Warriors, were going to, fall to the challenge, and they haven't, which has been good.
Yeah, quick shout out though to Matt. He will not be in the chat tonight. He's going to the game.
Is he? Okay. Bring him some luck then, hopefully.
Yeah, bring him some luck. He'll knowing him, he'll be on the Jumbotron. He gets on the Jumbotron like
does he?
Frequently. Yeah, I think like 5 times this season. I'm not kidding. He's been on the Jumbotron.
That takes some skill.
A gift. He's got a gift. He's a great dancer. Maybe that's why. Yeah, it kind of comes back to, as we're still talking about the moments of the week, and we kind of transition into Celtics at the same time. It comes back to something we both talked about, where it felt like, outside of, of course, not seeing what was going to go down at that point, we were talking about it, like the Celtics had more depth. Like the Warriors have some top tier talented players, but in terms of defense in particular, the Celtics had better options to limit Golden State, or hopefully limit them. And I think overall, when it counts, they've done a decent job overall. But it's obviously, when it comes down to it, it's enough to have them with the series lead, so you can't really complain about much.
No,
but it's just kind of what it comes down to, because we saw moments of Steph in particular being Steph, but we saw in game 3 Steph get into foul trouble early, and it kind of it gave me the idea that the Celtics were going to win. If Steph is in foul trouble that early, you can dissect that any call however you want. I'm not going to get into that because it's not my forte.
Yep.
But it gave me a feeling like the Celtics are going to win this game. If this is happening this early on, I have faith that the Celtics can, they've been resilient all year. That theme is there, that ability is there. It just felt like they were going to win. And that's what has me, as like I clued earlier, and I'll talk about the rest of the segment. Like, I'm very confident in the Celtics going forward. Like, really, really confident.
Well, that's the big thing, is obviously tonight's the night that they have struggled to. Obviously, they have a great win in game 3. Now you have to prove that in game 4 that wasn't just a fluke. And we've seen plenty of times these playoffs that they've let you down in this sense. But I'm kind of at the same feeling that you're at, because like I said, going into, we're not going to jump into, games 1 and 2 because those are long gone. So I thought we just kind of take some positives just overall from the series, and some negatives that we, some things we have liked, some things we haven't. That was my big thing from, like I mentioned earlier, from game 3, is the Celtics finally, it seemed like, decided to just say, we're bigger and stronger and more athletic than this team. We're just going to take it right to them. And they did that. They outscored Golden State 52-26 in points in the paint. They out rebounded them 47-31. They out offensive rebounded them. I thought Grant Williams and Rob Williams in this spot particular, I think they both had 3 offensive rebounds, were great. They out offensive rebounded the Warriors 15-6. Right from the tip, it looked like the Celtics, and like you said, Steph Curry got into foul trouble, so it looked like they wanted to attack him more, which is something I thought they should be doing all series. They right from the get-go in game 1, they put Steph on Tatum for some reason, which I don't understand that, why you would do that defensively. And Tatum really hadn't been going at him. He's obviously bigger than Steph, so you can take some jump shots over him. But if you're Tatum, I thought just go into the paint, play like a big man. If Steph's going to be on, you back him down. Maybe you get a foul like they were doing last night or 2 nights ago. You get to the line, you get your points that way. And he finally did that. It seemed like, and I think Van Gundy brought it up on the broadcast, he was driving to the basket with intent to score, not intent to, hopefully get fouled and go to the free throw line. So he was being more physical, which was good to see. And they need to do more of that. Rob Williams, I thought, probably had his best game of the entire playoffs. He looked like a guy who, wasn't hurt or wasn't, recovering from any sort of major knee injuries or anything. He was everywhere in the game. What's up?
Now he's confirmed available tonight. If anybody,
that's good
doubts, too. Given the fact that we've kind of had to wonder about him throughout the playoffs, so that's good for anybody who didn't.
Yep. Well, that's my big thing.
Official update.
My big thing with him tonight is I wonder how much he actually plays. Obviously, he played a ton, not a ton, but played almost 26 minutes in game 3. You didn't see a lot of Grant Williams. You didn't see any of Daniel Tice, which I'm not going to spend too much time on Daniel Tice here. I'm fine with. He's been horrible in this finals when he's been in there. He's not been good in the playoffs as a whole.
Like I told
his
you,
shine for you is worn off. Yep.
The morale guy thing wore off. I kind of I wasn't going to outright say it, but at the time, anyone who listens knows I was excited to have the morale guy thing. But the silver lining at this point is the fact that the trade allowed you to get rid of some contracts you didn't need and players you didn't need. So, that's a win. I mean,
I think the morale thing goes.
You didn't give anything of value up. And yeah, exactly. What I assume you're alluding to, he still provides that, a guy that's respected on the bench and a guy that
absolutely
can, be a leader. Not a guy that's, going to blow you away on the score sheet, but a guy that's a leader and that has the respect of his teammates. So
good locker room guy, good bench guy.
And it's freedom and fucking Bruno Fernandes.
Whatever. Yeah.
Whoever else. Did they move one other contract in that deal? I have no idea.
I can't remember I think was Schroeder in that one too. I know Richardson was in the White trade. That was obviously, I think Schroeder was the one that went too. And that was,
that trade too. Like, see you later. Smell you. Take the first round picks. This fucking San Antonio, whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, that's just, I wonder if, again, I know we just crap on him for a little, but I wonder if you'll see more of him tonight, just maybe off the 1 day of rest, how rusty will Rob Williams look? Because like I said, he was a huge factor in game 3. He was everywhere. I mean, he made a couple of the rebounds he got. And like I said, Grant Williams did a great job too. I thought this was really one of the first times these finals that you've seen Grant Williams make an impact. They were not afraid to go right at Draymond. I mean, again, I said it before the finals even started. Rob Williams should be able to feast in this series because they don't have anyone to cover him. I thought you'd maybe see more of Kuminga, but he hasn't played at all, I don't think. So you'd like to see Rob Williams if he can go again, give you half of what he gave you last night and you'd be all set because he's a guy, like I said, that played really, really well and had some big moments, a couple of offensive rebounds that he just was jumping flat out over guys. Not committing a foul, obviously, was doing it as you're supposed to, but he looked like a guy that, and he talked about it after the game too. He was asked a lot about, playing through pain and stuff. And he said that he was told, I think Marcus Smart was the guy that told him, like, this might be the one and only chance I get at playing in a finals, being Rob Williams. So I'm going to go out there and lay it all on the line, no matter how hurt I am, or if I can go out there at 20%, I'm going to do it.
Or injured.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, it makes you wonder, we're not talking too in depth about game 1 and game 2. If the Celtics are going to make someone their linebacker tonight, like Draymond Green was in game 2.
So I'm kind of waiting for, I thought you'd maybe see, especially after game 2, I thought you'd maybe see a little bit more Grant Williams do that. I mean, he was in Draymond's ear from time to time. I saw it yelling at him on the bench plenty of times. But you really haven't seen, I mean, that's not really, I wouldn't say that's really the Celtics style. They don't have a guy on the team that does, like, that's literally all Draymond does for Golden State at this point in his career. Cause he's like, let's just be honest here. He's washed. If this finals hasn't proven that to anybody, I don't know what you're watching, but
it's just so funny how we went to like the point where Giannis was burying people in the second round. And like, it's a little more understandable because he's so powerful and he's so big and he's like arguably the, top 3 player in the NBA, I'd say.
Yep.
Then you have Draymond Green, who's not in his prime anymore, just straight up throwing shoulders into people and burying them in broad daylight. And
it's like, what are you doing, man?
I saw somebody joke about it. It's like, I think Draymond like buried like people 29 times in game 2. Like
something ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, there was the one, insane. The one screen he had, he knocked down 3 or 4 guys all in a row. Like he took White out of the play, took Williams, and then took 4. 3 perfect blocks. I watching the game with my dad. He said, I think it was, he said something along the lines of like the 49ers, their preseason camp is probably a couple miles down the road. Like you can go join that.
Hanging out with Fred Warner. Maybe hanging out with Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw. But it's just so funny because I always joke how about doing this back since the Merrimack days. Basketball needs enforcers. Aaron Baines, the enforcer. This is not quite what I meant.
No, completely bodying people and making it a mockery of
a little more physicality. Like it'd make things more exciting. Maybe you get, you don't want fights, but the occasional fight, a little scuffle, it gets the people going, gets the views on social media and all that jazz. So, what was I going to allude to here? I kind of lost my train of thought talking about the whole enforcer thing, thinking about Aaron Baines, but
taking a trip down memory lane.
Yeah. I mean, back to game 3 that's the whole thing we're centering in on. I just, when it's different. I feel like every game you can find common themes and the reasons, I feel confident. Like there are certain games with the Celtics throughout this playoffs. Like I get to a certain point where something happens and I'm like, all right, they're going to win.
Mhm.
It just felt like, of course, as I alluded to earlier with Steph getting into foul trouble, even early on, they were 11 for 17 to start. I just felt like they were going to win that game. They got off to a hot start. They're at home. They have, I think, home court advantage, home ice advantage, whatever, is so massive, especially for a team in the Celtics that is playing their first finals in ages. And there's a lot of riding. There's a lot of, history. The fans are more fired up than they've ever been. I just felt like with a lot of different factors, like the crowd and everything going for them in a hot start and, flustering Steph a little bit, that they were going to win that game, and they did. So, and they won it fairly decisively in the end, which is always nice that you don't have to have like a super stressful nail biter.
Yeah,
there were
that third quarter you had
points in the game, but when they come out on top like they did, what was it, 116, 100?
Yep.
I mean, that's a nice margin to win by. So
absolutely. Well, that's what I mean. I feel like this game all around was the first complete effort you've seen in the finals. Maybe, I mean, I know game 7 was good for the Celtics against Miami, game 7 against Milwaukee, but like, I feel like this was one of the more like complete, because like I said, you finally, it seemed like, saw glimpses of a healthy Rob Williams. You got some bench scoring. You finally in the finals as a whole had your big three step up, and Brown, Tatum, and Smart all put together 20+ point games. Brown was phenomenal again. To spoil it right now for some of the positives that I had in these NBA finals, like I said, we're going to get to that in a second. Right now, I think it's a lot of people's consensus. If the finals were to end today, Jaylen Brown would probably be the MVP because he has been phenomenal through these 3 games. He had 17 points in the first quarter. You're rocking the Jaylen Brown.
I'm not Jared Sullinger.
Jaylen Brown. But yeah, Brown was excellent. I thought obviously game 2 was his, I don't want to say worst game because he didn't have a bad game, but it was not a typical Jaylen Brown performance. Game 2, I'll give Draymond Green credit there. He shut down Brown in that game. It looked like in game 3, Brown obviously took that personally. He came out, looked like a guy with, a fire under his ass and wanted to prove a point that he's not going to be shut down again. 17 points. Yeah, he's been
Smart out of the lineup or, just having a tough game, he responds.
He does. That's what he's usually gets off to a good start. Yeah, but that's what they needed. That's kind of, and to spoil one of my negatives, I mean, Jason Tatum again doesn't get off to a great start in game 3. You have Brown there to pick up that slack, and like I said, he was excellent in the first. Tatum kind of had his moments throughout the game to finish with 26 points, and then you had Marcus Smart. I don't want to say he was a no-show in the finals so far, but you really hadn't had any of that typical Marcus Smart performances yet. Game 3 had some moments, I think have 5 turnovers, which isn't great. Got a little sloppy in that third quarter, but fourth quarter came along. Marcus Smart, played to the big moment, 24 points, hit a couple of big threes down the stretch. Obviously the stat was out there after the game. The Celtics, they become the first trio to have 25-5 in a finals game since 1984 when Kareem, Magic, and Michael Cooper did that for the Lakers. So that's obviously pretty good company to be in there. And then, like you said,
Michael Cooper is.
I only recognize the name because I started watching that Lakers documentary that has John C. Reilly on. It's not bad.
He's awesome in that.
He's very good. The guy that plays, I don't know the actor's name that plays Magic Johnson, but he's very good in it as well. But yeah, good little watch. I watched that the second bout with COVID, so that was what kept me going through that.
Speaking of things you've been watching, real quick, where are you at on Stranger Things?
I just actually finished, because I'm one of the weirdos that didn't watch Stranger Things when it first came out. So I've spent the last beginning of this month till now trying to catch up on it. My brother finally convinced me, and you and a friend of mine at work all kind of beat me over the head with you should watch Stranger Things. So I finally decided to do it. I've got through episode 2 of the 4th season, I believe.
Whoa.
Yeah, we've been flying through it. Yep.
Smokes.
Yeah.
It's such I'm so jealous that you're just like getting to, the nitty gritty of season 4.
Someone should stop that Vecna guy. He's not a nice fella.
Dude, it is
through 2 episodes.
Awesome. It is an incredible show.
And, it is. It's very good.
I've talked to, friend of the show, Chris Blackie, who, grew up in that era a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And he said the nostalgia in that show overall is like practically spot on, which
it looks, yeah. Obviously, we don't know anything about that era, but I mean, I was not living through it. But like, it just seems like just the feel of it. It's like they pretty much hit like the neon, just
such a
all
great
that looks
show.
And
And, there's a lot of references and stuff through the show, like comic books, movies. And,
great soundtrack.
And it's just it's a fantastic show. It's a fantastic show.
This season, especially, obviously, if there's still people like me who haven't seen it, I've been telling my brother a couple times, like my dumbass, because it's a bunch of obviously the main characters are kids. Like I don't think of it like as a kid show, but like whenever there's like super violent and graphic shit.
Oh yeah. Oh come on, why are we
freezing? You can.
Oh, you froze
get away with this or not? I got nervous. Oh, did I? Oh yeah, just my connection came up unstable. But yeah, my dumbass thinks like, oh, there's kids in the show, so it's not going to be too gory or too violent. And then,
oh yeah,
the first 2 episodes of season 4, I'm like, Jesus, this is
not going to spoil specific details, but let me tell you, season 4 gets. I
can imagine it gets crazier after 2 episodes.
It takes a step up, and that's stepping up from just a fantastic 3rd season. Like season 3 was. Amazing. Season
3 was very good. Yep. Amazing. Season 2 was kind of a bore. My brother told me that going in. He's like, you're not probably going to like this season because it's a little slow, but everything else has been very good.
So good. Season 4 is fantastic. Final 2 episodes, July 1st. Very excited. But back to the Celtics, as we took a little tangent there.
Yep.
Where are we at in the outline here? What do we want to talk about next?
To wrap it up, I was just gonna, like I said, we're not gonna go too in depth with all the game breakdowns and stuff. I just was thinking of giving some positives that at least I've seen, some negatives that some things obviously you'd like to fix in the series moving forward, with obviously game 4 being tonight, and maybe if they get a 3-1 lead and close things out. But I'll defer to you to start. I don't know if you had any things that you've seen that you've really liked and some things that you think need to be cleaned up before I jump into kind of more of my stuff.
I just like how we've seen a consistent theme. I don't remember what game it was in particular that stands out in the Heat series, but when they need a consistent effort, you can rely on them to get it. And we got that in game 3. Like Smart, Tatum, Brown all over 20 points.
Yep.
Al Horford chipped in. Rob Williams, I think, what did he have? Like 10 rebounds?
Yep. 8 and 10, I think it was.
Yeah. I mean, that's what has me so confident about the Celtics, because they could struggle at any point in the game, and I'm always faithful in them being able to pull it out and turn things around. I can't say that about Celtics teams in the past. I've kind of talked about that at times over the past few weeks, going through this finals run, or run to the finals now. This team is just, there's resiliency, and then there's just a different level of resiliency that this team has. And I don't know as much as in terms of somebody who watches a lot of the NBA, but I don't know if there's been many teams that are like this in recent years. But like I said, I can't speak to that in specifics, but it doesn't feel like there has been.
Not that I can remember. I mean, that's just kind of been the biggest theme, obviously, of this season for the Celtics, is every time they, not that their backs were against the wall last night by any means, but like every time they seem to have one of those things, like we've talked about before, the big thing that everyone talks about is, anytime they seem to face adversity, they always seem to bounce back from it. And like, again, they did that in a microcosm last night with that bad 3rd quarter. You bounce back, big guys step up and hit big shots. Like I said, Tatum had some moments in that 4th, Smart a couple times, Brown was good. You just see that time and time again. And that's why, like, again, you hope tonight they can take that momentum, because I'm with you. I think you can carry momentum, obviously, with home court from game to game. I know there's some people that'll argue against that. But you got to think, you hope they're not riding too high. You hope they kind of put game 3 behind them and said, all right, game 4 is a totally new game. Golden State's going to make changes. They're going to probably come out and try to give their best effort they've given so far in these finals. And you hope the Celtics can, continue to do what they do and bounce back and not do what they've done throughout the playoffs, and that's kind of lay an egg in a big spot. Because I really think if they can either, I don't think they're going to blow them out tonight, but if they can squeak a win out here, I would not be hard pressed to say that the series is over. Like Golden State might get one back in Golden State, but I don't think the Celtics lose at home again.
There are stretches in games, you could pick apart any stretch. I think we saw a little bit of it at times in game 3, where they kind of lose their identity for a bit, but it goes back to the same point. In years past, I'd be like, okay, this is bad. Like, we're probably going to lose this game, or it's going to be pretty tough. But this team, like, they could have a bad stretch, and I'm like, all right, this game's not over. Like, no matter what quarter is in, unless it's like late in the 4th, like, I'm never out on this team. It's kind of crazy how it's been so consistent. And I might as well just get to it now. Celtics in 5.
You think so? Okay, so they're going to win three straight. All right.
I'm not going to put the L word on tonight, but I'm extremely confident in them winning at home again. And that high they're going to get off of winning tonight, which I think they will, of course. I think it's going to be enough to carry them over. Like, I think if they win tonight, Steph Curry is going to have to drop 50 to beat them in Game 5.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I was going. That was going to be my first positive.
I mean, Clay is there as well. Jordan Poole is there as well, but
yeah, but they haven't done anything.
There's no secret that Steph Curry is absolutely still the top dog and still the top guy to be, scared of. I think Jordan Poole at times has, shown that like Steph Curry kind of like FU 3-pointer ability where he kind of just like throws it up,
tosses it, and it goes in. Yep.
It's kind of crazy. Like that would be like a really cool way to be a nasty basketball player. Like that's how I would want to be if I were a really good NBA player, but I'm 5'10.5" and I'm not good at basketball in the slightest. That's a pipe dream. But dude, like, and it just comes back to another common theme. Like the Celtics just have a more well-rounded and deep defensive structure than the Warriors. Yep. It's a formula. Like if this series goes past 6 at this point, I'll be shocked. Absolutely shocked.
I'll be worried because I think if it goes past 6, then the Celtics would have to have done something like royally screwed up a game here or two. They would have had to have another massive collapse in them, which I think, I mean, it's been talked about. And the thing I was going to say, we haven't really talked about them at all. When you talk about, this is the best you've probably felt in a while with this Celtics team, is I think a lot of that, and again, maybe it's being talked about a lot more than I've seen, but I think that kind of aspect goes into the coaching ability of Ime Udoka. Like it's been talked about this week. A lot of people have brought it up. I don't know if you saw the comment. I think it was Grant Williams that was the first one that had it.
Yep.
When they asked about the third quarter collapse and Udoka walked over to the huddle and was like, when are you guys going to stop playing like assholes? And
I love that.
I do too. I think that's a perfect, and obviously big situation. You're not going to sugarcoat anything.
It'd be an issue with the Celtics. I hate that I bring this up so much of teams of the past, but a Celtics team like 2 or 3 years ago.
No, I think you're 100% right though. Yeah.
Like,
could you imagine Kyrie? Again, I don't want to bring up the Kyrie Irving thing, but like a team with him on it, could you imagine if a guy like Brad Stevens would have never done it? And maybe that's what goes into it too. But could you imagine like if Udoka was here with Kyrie walking over and saying that, and Kyrie probably shuts down and that's it? Like he's not going to respond to that coaching. Yeah, they wouldn't even be in this spot.
The thing too is this whole run highlights how seamless the transition is. Brad Stevens going into his new role. Ime Udoka, taking on a bigger role, having the tutelage of Popovich in San Antonio and carrying that into Boston. What was he with Milwaukee at one point too?
I knew it was Brooklyn and Philly. I don't know if he ever
mixing up, but he had this like kind of like foundation of experience that he was, of course, ready to take the next step. And it's crazy how seamless, it took a little bit till towards January for it to really materialize, but the moves they made, and you get Horford, you get Derek White, you move out some players you don't need. You figure out the bench situation. Like I think they've really got a good handle on how they want to handle their bench players.
Yep.
And they have a legit trustworthy starting 5. Of course, at points in the playoffs, there's been health concerns with Smart and Williams in particular. And now you have a little bit with Tatum in his shoulder, but I'm not super worried about that.
No, I don't think. Yeah.
Knock on wood, but this team just it has a synergy that it hasn't quite had in a long time. And I say this as a guy that's not a super, in-depth basketball observer and watcher, but it just like, even when I'm not super into the Celtics, I do follow things. I follow storylines, and it just, of course, what we've talked about in the past too. It's not like I just don't listen to the facts that you've had to say in the past, and you're more plugged in on the Celtics than I am. Like this team is just different. I'm repeating.
It's got that feel to it.
It's just different. That's the theme for me. They're different. They're very different, and they're dominant. It's just there's never been a point where I'm like, okay, they've got this trend going since January of this team, this identity they've established, but there's never been a stretch where I'm like, oh my God, I'm super worried about this team since. They always show the ability to bounce back, and it's just crazy. And I think the value of Al Horford in particular, Marcus Smart just continues to become a better leader every year. The defensive player of the year stuff just helps his case as a leader and as a overall impact player more. But Al Horford, dude, like I remember we talked about it. We had questions about it, like, oh, they brought Al Horford back. This is a little weird. Let's see if it works. And it's worked better than we could have ever expected.
It's no one I think expected.
So much credit to them too, in particular, because you think of Brown and Tatum as a particular scorers, and that's no slight on them, but they have this mix that just works so well from top to bottom.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching the game the other night. I kind of had the not epiphany or anything crazy like that, but I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, because again, I wanted to bring up the point of how well Udoka's done, and I wanted to compare it to Alex Cora in the 2018 Red Sox. Like everyone throughout that playoffs was like, well, Alex Cora is pushing every button he's pushed has been the right one. It seems like you said, it took a while to get here with Udoka, and obviously there were a ton of questions on if he was the right guy, and I think he has obviously silence any possible remaining doubters if he had any to begin with at this point. But it seems like in just these finals alone, every button he has pushed so far, whether it's calling guys assholes in the huddle to get them out of their funk they're in, or that first game. I know a lot of people just to talk about it, there was some questions on with Marcus Smart being on the bench during that comeback, keeping guys like White and Pritchard out there. It worked out. I mean, yeah, it might be a little weird if you sat there and say, the reigning defensive player of the year was on the bench for the majority of the fourth quarter during that comeback. But White and Pritchard were hitting shots. White had a great game in game one. Udoka had to trust him to, stay with them and keep them out there and have them do what they did. Like I said, last night, 2 nights ago, game 3, you push Rob Williams, have him play a little bit more maybe than he has in the past, and he shows up and plays really well. So again, I just think it's been, I don't want to say that Udoka has coached circles around Steve Kerr in this series, because I don't think that's been the case. I think it's been, pretty even for the most part. But he's done a phenomenal job. And again, the fact that, like you said, everything has kind of gone right since January 1st, like we've been talking about for a long time. I think it comes back to the coaching job that he's done. And again, we talked about it when the voting came out, why I thought he should have had way more consideration for coach of the year than he ended up obviously having. But
yeah, man, they've got a winning formula. That's what it all comes back to.
Seems like it, but
the themes of anything we talk about, pretty much, it just comes back to this winning formula that they've established. And I mean, even past this year, obviously, we're not going to look forward to next year. It's just hard not to be optimistic about the future at this point, because they got all, like, it feels like they're over that hump they were trying to get over for years.
Yep.
And
I think so.
Change, but it certainly feels that way right now. And they're 2 wins away from winning a fucking championship, which is dope. So
just insane to think of, just from where we thought this team was going to be at the start of the season. I think both of us saying this was pretty much a bridge year, and we'll see what happens next year.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll surprise us and go on a run. And then sitting here, me in particular in December being like, we're not talking about the Celtics on this show until they do something that gives, them worth talking about. And then obviously them going on their epic run that they did to shut me right up. It's just been an absolutely crazy ride from day one to now. But just some other, like I said, real quick, some positive and negative takeaways I've had so far in the finals. And I just didn't know if you had any other thoughts you wanted to add when I go into mine. Some of the positive stuff, obviously, the Celtics have done in this series. I had this thought, like I mentioned, I think we talked about this last week, or maybe you and I talked about it off air, that Steph Curry obviously had a big game one. He's had a big series so far. There's some people asking if the Celtics win the NBA final, should Steph Curry be named MVP? I saw that discussion come up a little bit just because of how great of a series he's had. No, we're not giving the MVP to the guy that maybe ends up losing the finals, but he has put up MVP numbers. He's, averaging 31.3 points per game. He's shooting over 45% from the field and from three. He's been typical Steph Curry. But the thing is, and why it's been a positive for the Celtics, is they've limited everybody else. Klay Thompson, he's averaged 17 points a game. Wiggins, as you mentioned, has had his moments, 16.3 points per game. Jordan Poole, who I thought was going to be more of a factor. He was one of the guys that I keyed in on when we previewed the finals, saying, this guy could give you a lot of problems off the bench. He really hasn't. 12 points per game through 3 games. And then Draymond Green, who has, he's been a factor in the past championships for Golden State. But as I said earlier, he is washed at this point. 5 points per game. The Celtics have done pretty much everything they can to limit everybody else except for Steph Curry, which is something I'm fine with. Like I said, I think I said this halfway through his game one, 3-point barrage that he had in that first quarter, that if you want to let Steph Curry, or he wants to go out and drop 30 and 40, he's going to do it. So not let him, but it's going to happen. If you can limit all these other guys, then you're probably going to be in good shape. And that's exactly what they've done to sit here to be up 2-1 right now, which again, I'm fine with. And now Steph is injured. There's an ankle injury. I think it's what it is now. So maybe that hampers him, and maybe you have to have someone like Clay or Wiggins step up if they can do that. If not, who knows? But that's obviously going to be something to keep an eye on moving forward.
Sounds like he should be good, but overall, it's just something to monitor. It can linger. My whole thing with someone on a losing team, in this hypothetical sense, the Celtics winning MVP, or in the NHL winning Conn Smythe, you have to do just something completely ridiculous. Like if Steph averaged like 41 points a game, like there was a discussion when the Oilers were buzzing in the Stanley Cup playoffs, if McDavid got to the end where they were to lose to Tampa or the Rangers in the Cup Finals, and McDavid ended with like 45 points, like 50 points, something ridiculous. You'd really have to consider giving it to Connor McDavid, or whatever level that might be for Steph Curry, whether it be 40 points a game, 45, something ridiculous. I don't know. There's just something crazy. That's my theme here. I really don't think a losing player should ever win MVP or
no.
Something completely otherworldly to do so.
Yeah, he's gonna have to drop, I think, like 50 in the remaining however many games it takes him. And if they can get 3 wins, he'd have to average, like I said, 50 at least, and finish the series with probably 45 plus points per game on average, and shoot more than 50% from the field and from deep to even consider it. But
yeah. So friend of the show, Mike McClellan, has some prop bets he wanted us to mention. He's got Warriors to win and Clay over 20.5 points. Don't agree with that one. And he's also got Derek White over 10.5 points. So
I'll agree with the White over 10.5, because that was the other one of the positives I was going to have, is how well he has played in this finals. A guy that I was not happy with his play at the start of the playoffs. Again, it's been the theme of the season. The Celtics proving me wrong. He's been phenomenal, both on the offensive and the defensive end. The play has caught a lot of people's eyes from last game was I think it was the 3-on-1 Golden State had, where he ran out to defend a Steph Curry 3 that he didn't take, and then ran back and almost had a block on, I think it might have been Jordan Poole that had the layup. Maybe it was Otto Porter, but I can't remember. But just that play, obviously, the heart and hustle he's had in the finals so far has been excellent. And again, kudos, as we said, to the Celtics and Brad Stevens and Ime Udoka, pushing all the right buttons. Kudos to Brad Stevens, obviously, for bringing him in. What was the other one? He had Clay over
20.5 and Warriors to win in a parlay.
I could see Clay over 20.5 again, just because I think if Golden State wants to win this game, they have to have somebody other than Steph Curry step up.
Celtics are winning though.
You think so?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's true. You said Celtics in 5. I mean, I would love the Celtics to win, but I also don't want to be that guy that when we pick the finals, so far, every game pick I have had so far has been correct. I had the Celtics winning in games 1 and 3, Golden State winning in games 2 and 4. So that doesn't really bode well for me if that happens, but I'd like that to be, again, proven wrong. But yeah, I could definitely see that even if they do lose Golden State tonight, I think Klay Thompson has to step up in this game. He had 25 last game, so he maybe figured something out. But if he doesn't and Steph has to go out there and try to get 30 plus again, like they're going to lose. They need somebody else other than Steph Curry to play and step up, and they just haven't had that, which again, kudos to the Celtics for locking down pretty much everybody else. But Golden State, you got to think they're going to draw something up tonight where they get either Clay or Wiggins. Maybe I haven't seen any starting lineups. They're probably not going to start Poole, but maybe you'll see a little bit more of him off the bench early. Because like I said, they need some sort of offense. It just can't all be Steph Curry. And you've seen that so far. When it has been, they have not had a ton of success.
Yeah. Go C's.
Yep.
Go C's.
Absolutely. Can we the other thing, I'm not going to go through the rest because there's a lot of stuff here. But just the one negative, I think it's obviously been a negative in a lot of people's minds throughout these playoffs, along with the, keeping the turnovers down, because the 2 games the Celtics have beaten the Warriors in the turnover battle. Games 1 and 3, they have obviously won. When the Celtics lost the turnover battle, had 19 turnovers and allowed 33 points to come off of those, they lost in game 2. So let's keep the turnovers down, of course. And then the big one, it's been happening, like I said, all playoffs. It's happened in these finals for all 3 games so far. Can we stop taking our foots off the gas pedal in the third quarter? Through the 3 games so far, Golden State's outscored Boston 106-63 in the third. They're shooting 47.1 from the field compared to Boston's 32.8. They're shooting 54.1 from deep compared to Boston's 32. On the resilience thing, though, the Celtics have, again, the theme of the bouncing back and overcoming adversity. They've bounced back. They've played good fourth quarters. The Celtics have. They've outscored Golden State 63-27 in their games 1 and 3 wins in the fourth quarter. They're out shooting them from the field and from deep. from deep particularly has been ridiculous. 55 for the Celtics percent from three compared to Golden State's 17.6. I thought that was a typo when I first saw that, just how bad that number is for the Golden State Warriors. Because obviously you think of them as a great 3-point shooting team. But again, that's kudos to the Celtics. The defense has stepped up tremendously at times when it needs to, particularly in crunch time in the fourth quarter. And you hope that you can give a full 4-quarter effort instead of having these lulls in the third quarter. But again, we've been talking about that all playoffs. Maybe tonight that finally changes. I know. Yep, that's the street I live on. And then the final one I mentioned earlier kind of spoiled it. Jason Tatum. Yes, he's put together some good numbers point wise the last two games, 28 and 26 in games 2 and 3. But he needs to get off to a quicker start. Like you can't. Maybe you can because he's been so great in the first quarter with Jaylen Brown, like I said, right now MVP of the finals, if you ask me. But you can't rely on him to, be your main scoring asset in the first quarter the rest of the way. Like Jason Tatum has to get going. Maybe get a little bit more out of Marcus Smart in the first quarter, just something to take the load off of Brown a little bit. Cause you got to think at some point Golden State's going to try to key in on him more. And maybe this is the bounce back game that Draymond Green has against him, like he did in game 2. He struggled in game 1 against him. Game 2, he ate Jaylen Brown's lunch for the most part. Maybe tonight he tries that again, and you have to get something more from Tatum because if you do, that obviously makes the rest of this thing, if the offense moving forward, a whole lot easier, and obviously opens up more for guys around him.
Yeah, I agreed pretty much on all fronts. Just
all right,
going to echo your sentiments because I think we're kind of in the same boat for the most part here.
I believe so.
If you want to segue us into Bruins, I have to go to the bathroom really badly. So.
Okay. All right. I'll start. I will save the yelling about the Bruce Cassidy stuff for when you return. Obviously, the week started off good for the Bruins with the Selke Award going to Patrice Bergeron. He pretty much cements his Hall of Fame resume or adds to it with a record-breaking 5th Selke. Beats out Florida's Alexander Barkov and Calgary's Elias Lindholm, who finished 2nd and 3rd. St. Louis's Ryan O'Reilly finished 4th. Tampa Bay's Anthony Cirelli finished 5th. And Los Angeles's Anze Kopitar finished 6th, receiving 3 first-place votes. Bergeron, of course, received 1,798 points. Lindholm, who finished 2nd, to put it in perspective, finished with 878. The voting breakdown for Bergeron, in case people were curious, didn't see it. He finished with 160 first-place votes, 20 second-place votes, 11 third-place votes, 0 fourth-place votes, while getting 3 fifth-place votes. I was going to get Mike's reaction to that when he comes back because I thought that was kind of funny. But just another, like I said, addition to Patrice Bergeron's already Hall of Fame resume. It just kind of backs up the thought of that once he retires, that the trophy should probably be renamed the Patrice Bergeron Award just because of how dominant he has been. With you back, wanted to get your thoughts on this. I was talking about the voting breakdown that I saw come out the other day about Bergeron's first place finish. Can you explain to me how he gets 0 fourth place votes, but 3 people were stupid enough to vote him for like 5th place? That just doesn't. I can't. It just doesn't make any sense. I saw that. I'm like, how do you get no 4th? Like, not again that he obviously won in a landslide, but just the fact that there were 3 people that voted for. Like, I'd love to know the 4 people that are the 3 people that thought 4 people were 4 players were better than Bergeron this year.
Yeah, there were some bizarre ballots. I'm not going to go through all of them, but some really bizarre ones. It was funny. I joked on Twitter about how Wayne Gretzky's got some Kings bias due to him playing for the Kings at some portion of his career. He voted Anze Kopitar. I like Anze Kopitar and I like his 2-way game, but he just wasn't the winner this year. So not sure about that one from Wayne Gretzky, but he is the great one. So not going to show any disrespect, but I mean, I'll be honest, throughout the Selke isn't the biggest deal in the world, but Bergeron has been snubbed a few times. It was nice to see him win so decisively because I kind of had this worry where I think a lot of voters voted for Teague, the whole Mark Lazarus meme where Patrice Bergeron is very good, but he's not in fact the only 2-way player in the league. And people of course made memes about that because Bergeron got so many of the votes this year, 160 out of 195. Wasn't even close. This is nothing against Barkov and Lindholm because I think Lindholm, his 2-way game has transcended quite a bit over the past few years, and Barkov is practically like a bigger version of Pavel Datsyuk these days. He's just ridiculous, and he's so intelligent with the puck and his stick in particular. in the defensive zone, of course, as well. If you're being nominated for the Selkie, but Bergeron, in terms of, I don't have the stats on me from JFresh on Twitter, but he's just dominated so many of the overall votes, like so many of the high tier votes, like first place votes over the past, like whatever decade or however many years. He's the greatest 3-zone player of all time. Like he is. He really is.
Don't think that can be debated anymore.
Outside of other, things with Bergeron we'll discuss later in the podcast here, but he deserved to win this award by a decisive margin, and he did. Anyone who thought otherwise, I don't know, just not me. Maybe some of these people buy into the plus minus thing because Elias Lindholm, on top of that top line for Calgary, who everybody finished with like a plus 60 or better rating, finished with like a plus 61. Plus minus is a pretty stupid stat in some regards, though, so I don't really buy into it that much, but I have to imagine some people did. Mm-hmm. Bergeron deserved to win this award, and he did, because if he didn't, I just would have been even more mad than I'm going to get.
That's the one positive of the week, in all honesty.
Yeah, and it's so funny how they announced this whole thing with Cassidy and the firing after Bergeron wins the Selkie.
It's typical Bruins, to be honest.
It was all planned. I 100% believe that.
Mm-hmm.
But congratulations to Bergeron. I mean, to see the whole tribute video of Bob Gainey, Sean Couturier was in the video, Pavel Datsyuk, and a bunch of other former NHLers, big time NHLers, wish him congratulations, was cool. It's just funny how they released another Selkie video today, and this is kind of making me sound very pessimistic, but it's very clear that they're putting some of the stuff out to kind of distract from things a little bit, which is pretty embarrassing. But I'm not going to blame them on the social media person, because they're just doing their job. Yeah. It's just the philosophy of the organization right now, which is pretty disgraceful. Off-season injury updates. We talked.
This is where the news starts to take a little bit of a dip and then a complete nosedive.
Yeah.
As we get closer to the end of the week.
Talking about Bergeron's historically dominant season, not only defensively, the team was better to the point with him on the ice than maybe ever. He has become such an offensive driving force more and more per year. He just like fine wine. It's incredible. He had just an insane, stupidly good season. I hope to God he doesn't retire, but there are varying factors in that debate. So we'll get to those. We do have Matt Grzelcyk, right shoulder open stabilization procedure on June 3rd. Expected recovery time 5 months. November return. Charlie McAvoy, left shoulder arthroscopic stabilization procedure. Still having fun at the Celtics game, though, as we saw the video on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Expected recovery time 6 months. So a December return, not great, not good at all. But shit happens, unfortunately. Mike Riley, right ankle tendon repair and removal of bone fragments. Sounds terrible.
Very painful.
Yeah. The expected recovery time is approximately 3 months. So if he is a trade candidate, that puts things in a little more of a cloudy state, but we'll see what happens there as the offseason progresses. Patrice Bergeron, as we saw, a picture leaked of him at an MMA fight with Craig Smith, John Moore, and their all three of their respective wives / fiancés, girlfriends, whatever it may be. We're at the fight in Plymouth. If I had known they were there, I would have went there just to be in the presence of Patrice Bergeron, but I didn't know until the day after. So, and, watching fights is cool as well. Left elbow surgery to repair a tendon that had, according to reports, been bothering him from anywhere from the last 2 to 5 years. So that's good that's fixed. 10 to 12 weeks, not a crazy recovery time. Hopefully Bergie's going to be okay, and hopefully he decides to stay. That kind of rhymed. It leads to the question you posed in the outline of what the hell could this team look like at the start of the season, particularly on the defensive end. I will start with the offensive side of things.
Okay.
This is a pure guess. I didn't get super in depth on this, but just kind of vibes. I'd say Hall, Coyle, and Pasternak, with Marchand, of course, being out of the noteworthy forwards. You're probably looking at Trent Frederick on the second line with Eric Howell and Craig Smith. If you like John Beecher more, maybe you put him in the mix, because I think there's a chance John Beecher starts the season with the team next year. Then if Frederick's on the second line, you got Beecher or Jakub Lauko on the wing. I'd say I'd prefer with McLaughlin and Steen. Look, Lauko was a guy that showed NHL promise early on in his career in the preseason in particular. He's had a tough go with injuries and, struggles at time, but I think he's worth a look. If you feel like you can make it work, I think it's worth a look at this point. Him being a 2018 draft pick, a guy you felt like could have been a first round talent maybe that dropped to the third round. I think it's worth at some point in the season giving Jakub Lauko a look, even though the injuries in the AHL production haven't been up to par and they've kind of, the injuries have kind of limited things. I think you ideally want to see what you have in Jakub Lauko and then go from there at some point, whether it's a short sample size or a larger sample size. I would like to see him at some point, but at this point, I've kind of felt this way for a few weeks. I think we're going to see John Beecher at some point. That's another guy. Different situation as Lauko, but I imagine they will want to give him some sort of NHL sample size. If Lauko doesn't get one, that's pretty damning. And that's pretty unfortunate because he's an exciting player that's had an unfortunate development path recently. But fourth line, Foligno, Nosek, Wagner. Pretty ugly looking fourth line.
I'd say so.
But I mean, I like Wagner. That's the big thing for me. If Nosek can win faceoffs, I'm fine with him. Hopefully, he can score a little more. Nick Foligno. All of my things to say about Nick Foligno, let me tell you. Defense, Lindholm, Carlo, Riley, Zaboro, Forber, Clifton is how I would do it. If you were to trade Mike Riley, I wouldn't be opposed to putting Jack Shawn in that second pair with Zaboro. I think that'd be a fun pairing. I think it'd be worth experimenting with. Then you got Swayman and Omar Canet, as expected. So anything that sticks out to you about that hypothetical line combination scenario?
Yeah, I was going to ask you with Don Sweeney still here, and again, we'll ramp up to the discussion of that in a second. But with him still here, I'm very shocked that in your hypothetical you don't have whatever fourth line and third line bums are currently on the market to patch some of these holes for a little bit, because that's the direction I see Don Sweeney going in this offseason. Is I know they've signed some guys to two-way contracts, so maybe it makes it look like Beecher, so maybe, like you said, it gives him an opportunity to come up here. And we obviously saw what McLaughlin and Steen did last year in spurts. But again, just like to save face, I feel like Sweeney could be sitting there going, well, maybe if, I go out and spend some money and sign some guys, maybe the fans won't, we'll see like, oh, we did something this offseason. So yeah. So to me, it just feels like another, like, let's go out and bargain bin shop and, get some crap guys in here to fill these little holes that we have for the time being. And then, we can maybe just get rid of them once the main guys come back. And again, that would just add to another, what I 100% at this point just think it's going to be a completely frustrating, doesn't matter what Don Sweeney does off season, like it's going to be the wrong decision.
Yeah, it's just, it might not always be the wrong decision, but it's always going to come back to, this is a product of what you caused if you're Don Sweeney.
Yep.
It's so funny how, there's been differing discussion points from Sweeney and Cassidy about young players. And whether they should or should not get opportunities, when Don Sweeney signed all these bottom six forwards that are blocking these young players.
Can't really play them when
get a chance. There's way too much going on with this team in a bad way. And I hate it. I truly hate it so much. And in a good way and in a bad way, they don't have the cap space to overpay free agents. But at the same time, if they use the long-term IR space, they could with all these injuries, they could. And then once those guys are coming back, they can sort things out in will likely be a clusterfuck.
That's a scary predicament and a scary future that could be on the horizon.
I've never hated a Bruins offseason more in my entire life. And this was an offseason that if you keep Bruce Cassidy and things go relatively normally, you don't have all these injuries, you pretty much just have Patrice Bergeron to sign. You can let Curtis Lazar go. Maybe you keep Lazar at the right price and he's good. But Curtis Lazar is going to have a market and he's going to be offered more than Boston will likely offer him. So love Curtis Lazar, but he was a throw-in in the trade. It just happens with fourth liners here. You have to move on from him at some point, especially when you got guys like McLaughlin and Steen, Beecher, Lauko, whoever it may be, Cam Hughes, they keep him around, could be in the mix for the fourth line. Whoever. I will say I don't think it's going to be Bleed and Frodin. I think they're both gone.
I think Bleed's 100% gone, yeah.
There is way too much going on with this team, and it's self-inflicted. Don Sweeney caused this. They used the scapegoat of Bruce Cassidy to cover up for their problems, and I think Don Sweeney's going to try to sell David Pastrnak in particular, Patrice Bergeron on this team can compete, and he's going to do whatever he can too. But they're just not going to be able to. This team's not going to compete
chance.
if they right now, unless they make this miraculous turnaround. They're not going to do anything next year. That's just like not going to happen. And I hate to do this, even though it's an exciting draft class. If there's a year where it's okay to miss the playoffs, it's this year's draft class. It has the chance to, ironically, 20 years later, be the best draft class since the 03 draft, which was a very stacked class. Dustin Brown, Ryan Getzlaf, a litany of good players in that draft that are, Dustin Brown and Ryan Getzlaf just retired this year. Plenty of good players. Tomas Vanek is another one that came out of that draft. Plenty more. Not going to go into that. That's not what we're really talking about, but it's just cluing to the 2023 draft. I hate the idea of missing the playoffs, but you're just not going to make it every year in this, transition. However,
this would be the year
it may be. The 2023 draft is stacked. You have the top three guys of Bedard, Michkov, who might not be in the NHL until 2026, given his contract, but he's considered to be the next Ovier Kucherov. Adam Fantilli, fantastic. Brandon Yeager, Zach Benson, Theo Lindstein, Quentin Musty. There are so many ridiculously talented players. There's more that I'm not going to mention because I'm not just going to do a whole 2023 draft preview here. The 2023 draft is looking to be absolutely stellar. One of the better drafts we've seen, maybe the best draft we end up seeing in the past decade. It's looking to be amazing. Of course, these conclusions can be drawn over years and whatever conclusions you want to draw. But right now, it looks fantastic. And if there's a year where I'm okay with the Bruins missing the playoffs, ideally you do. But even if they do, I'm not optimistic about this team, no matter what they do, making a playoff run. They're just not going to do it. They're not in shape to do it unless they were to just turn into absolute world beaters and find a formula. I think more likely than not, they're either going to be fighting for a wild card spot and miss out, or they're going to get the last seed in the East and probably lose in the first round. That's just how it is. But
yeah, I could 100% see that. But that's what we talked.
Back to the theme. There's too many questions around this team right now. It's ridiculous.
Well, that's what we talked about before we jumped on here. Is that was kind of the question I asked you. It's like the timing to me, the firing of Cassidy made zero sense. I mean, I 100% agree with you that I think he's 100% the fall guy here for Sweeney and Neely's just not being able to figure out anything the last couple of years. But like you just said, there's so many questions around this team. The fact that you have, obviously, like you said, if everything's in a perfect world here and you have Cassidy still and you don't have any of these injuries that have come up over the last couple of weeks, your one problem is Bergeron. Okay, so your one problem is Bergeron. You have that to begin with. Now you do have all these injuries come up. There's questions there. There's still questions. Again, there's still some people holding out hope that maybe you can get David Krejci back here. So there's that question that looms. Now you don't have a head coach. So I was talking to a buddy of mine at work the other day. I'm like, who is going to want to come in with all these problems and all these questions that you have right now? Who is rightfully going to want to come in here and coach this team? Like, you are pretty much, I feel like, set up for failure, at least this first year, with going to a team like you said, where you have as many. It's not like, okay, you're missing a couple of, bottom six guys and you're missing, one defenseman you can plug and play here. You're missing, some pretty backbone guys of your team. So like, that's a huge red flag right there for, I think, anybody coming in to try to coach this team. And then obviously, like you said, there's, I don't know, not, you didn't say this, but like, is there some distrust? Maybe, I don't know. That's how I kind of see it. The image of upper management with how Bruce Cassidy was treated, does a head coach want to come here and maybe have that looming over their head to the thought like, okay, well, upper management is going to be on my back. It seems like maybe from day one here about how I do things, with all the stuff that's come out about maybe how Cassidy had, again, with the treating the players and the media and stuff like that. I saw that question was brought up again the other day. So there's just, like you said, too many questions with this team right now. And the fact that now you add another, a bigger question, I think, now than the Bergeron returning is, what do you do with head coach now? It's just a stupid decision and stupid timing from Don Sweeney and, maybe hire whoever the hell you want to blame at this. If it's, you think higher up on the Bruins, the Jacobs family or Cam Neely or whoever.
Yeah, they're just such a combination of factors. It's so hard to sort it out because there's so much we still don't know. But like we've clued at, the obvious scapegoat here, and if you don't think this way, you're an idiot.
I haven't found anybody I feel like that is think they're Bruins on the right.
The scapegoat. It's just so obvious. And on top of that, as I have in the outline here, There's a lot of change going on. They had Cassidy fire Kevin Dean, who was an assistant coach when Cassidy was assured 2 or 3 weeks ago that he was going to be kept around status quo. And now he's gone, so that doesn't look good. Kim Brandvold, skills coach, skating coach, whatever. I forget the exact title. I should remember that. But he's going to BU to be with Jay Pandolfo. Jay Pandolfo, you lost him too. Him and Brandvold are going to be at BU. Brandvold's been around for a long time. John Ferguson Jr. in Providence, I think he's considered the GM of the Providence Bruins. He's gone. Donnie Del Negro, head trainer, he's been gone. We talked about that. They did that whole golf cart thing for him, and that emotional little video. And of course, unfortunately, his career as a Bruin had to end losing in a heartbreaking Game 7. And now we have Bruce Cassidy. Like, there's a lot going on with this team. I don't like it. I don't like the idea. So I've seen some people throw out of promoting Ryan Mougenel, who's the Providence coach, right away. I don't think that's the play. I think if there's an internal option, it's Chris Kelly. And the odds of who is going to be coach doesn't seem like they're in on Chris Kelly being the head coach right away. But I'd be totally cool with it. I think he's got the respect of guys like Marchand and Pastrnak, or Bergeron in particular, given the fact that they played together. And, guys like Pastrnak and Carlo and whoever, McAvoy, I feel like know who Chris Kelly is at this point. And I think he's probably established some respect, because if he didn't, I feel like they might have had Bruce Cassidy fire him too, which, would be pretty stupid. But I mean, he fired Kevin Dean and they really wanted to put some change under Bruce Cassidy. They might have done that, but clearly they had him fire Kevin Dean, maybe because they didn't want to. That wouldn't surprise me with how spineless they've done things.
That'd be right up their alley.
Then it leads to Don Sweeney just showing up at Bruce Cassidy's house, probably with a cake that says "FU" on it, like Dwight in The Office. He puts the frosting haphazardly on Kevin's cake. He's like, "Bye bye, Kevin." Nope. Like, "Bye bye, Toby." And Kevin says, "At least it's chocolate," as he eats it with his hands. It's gotten to the point more for a while now where I've been more so pissed off of how they've handled it, more so than losing Cassidy. And I love Cassidy. I really do. I think he was a great fit. There's complaints about, whether he got along with certain players in terms of, Jake DeBrusk in particular. But at the same time, I do love Cassidy, and I think he will land in his feet and be pretty successful wherever he lands. But I do think they can, there's not a lot of faith right now with how they've handled things, but they can find a coach that can be successful here and, not be a complete idiot. But
you hope.
I hope. Right now, I will say the two betting favorites, it seems to be, don't give me David Quinn. Don't give me David Quinn. Okay. I'm all set on David Quinn. I have respect for David Quinn, but I just, I don't have a lot of faith in him. He didn't last super long.
Didn't work with the Rangers, right?
With the Rangers.
Yeah.
He's not a guy that gets me excited about head coach. There's no coach that's going to come in and turn this team into a conference finals team in year one. But there are better options than David Quinn. I would take Jay Leach, who's the other betting favorite from Seattle, a year after. It'd be kind of crazy to see him leave so soon, but a head coaching job is a head coaching job. People seem to think Nate Lehman from Providence is an option. I kind of have my doubts, as I've put out on Twitter, because he did sign a 3-year extension. I think it was 3-year, multi-year, something multi-year at the very least with Providence, and he's got a lot of loyalty there. The Bruins had interest in him when they were thinking of hiring Cassidy. They choose Cassidy over him. They had interest in him last summer when they decided to hire Ryan Mougenel, because I think part of it was they couldn't get Lehman to leave Providence. So maybe they offer Lehman that head coaching gig again, and he just can't refuse this time, even after signing an extension with the Providence College Friars. But I kind of have a hard time believing, after a contract extension with an organization that he's pretty much a god in the college ranks, he would just leave a month or so, or 2 months after signing an extension. So I love the idea. I think Nate Lehman would be a fantastic NHL coach with some experience under his belt, get things started, and then he could become a really good coach. But I just don't see it happening. If there's one of the betting favorites, it's Jay Leach for me. I still think Chris Kelly has an outside shot, but it's kind of hard to say with, he's got a very little amount of coaching experience, but I think in terms of internal promotion, he makes the most sense. Mark Savard isn't in the mix, but I think they can consider Mark Savard. Be very cool with that, and he's acquired some coaching experience with the Windsor Spitfires this year in the OHL. So it's not like he has no experience, and guys still got a love for the game. And who doesn't love Mark Savard in Boston? Like, who doesn't?
You're hard pressed to find someone that doesn't. So
he's for what he's been through, and concussions and anything he's dealt with after hockey. He comes off as a very positive person, and a guy that in his heyday in the NHL was an extremely effective playmaker and played with extremely high hockey sense. I'd be all over at least him starting as an assistant and maybe moving his way up in the future. But there's a lot of options. But it just comes back to this whole thing being botched. They didn't have to do this, and they in terms of Cassidy's performance, but they did because it was their scapegoat. Just some stats real quick. This is from April 30th, but it's still relevant. In NHL history, there are 112 coaches who coached 6+ seasons. 3 out of 112 had 6 consecutive years with a 650 points percentage or more, 107-point pace in an 82-game season. Scotty Bowman, Glenn Sather, and Bruce Cassidy. Reminder that Cassidy, this is May 19th now from TuckerPoint.net, Tucker_TNL on Twitter. Reminder that Cassidy is one of 3 coaches in NHL history, along with Glenn Sather and Scotty Bowman, to coach 6 consecutive seasons with a 650 points percentage. Let me just give you some stats. Scotty Bowman won 5 Stanley Cups in a decade with the Canadiens in the 70s, 73, 76, 77, 78, and 79. Not too bad, I'd say.
Pretty good.
Glenn Sather won 4 Stanley Cups in a decade with the dominant Oilers teams of the 80s.
Pretty good.
In 84, 85, 87, and 88. Pretty good teams, pretty good coaches. It's one of those things I don't imagine Don Sweeney looks into and Ken Neely looks into in this type of stuff, these types of situations, but it's just brutal. Like, it just put things in perspective a little bit, like how good of a coach he was. Didn't have the cup accomplishments like Sather and Bowman did, but it's just brutal. And it just goes back to the point that he was insured a couple weeks ago that he would be coaching the Bruins. Kidding.
That's my biggest problem. That's why I think this looks so much worse than it could have. Like,
so brutal. Like, another stat too, real quick from J Fresh Hockey. Bruins expected 5-on-5 goals against in Cassidy's tenure, which is limiting high danger scoring chances in general, slot scoring chances, whatever. 2017-2018, they were second best. Next season, second best. Next season, first best. Number 1.
Doesn't get much better than that.
21. Yeah, certainly doesn't. Third best. And this past season, best in the league. And that's another thing that worries me. I think Bruce Cassidy, we saw catastrophic moments with this defensive core. When they were bad at times, they were real bad. But overall, they did a very good job of limiting high danger scoring chances. Not as much when it matters. At some points in like these big games, they've kind of struggled. But overall, with all these metrics and everything, they're very good under Bruce Cassidy. And I have a really hard time thinking a new coach can keep that intact. A very hard time.
I don't see how you could. Like, that's my bit. Like, you rattle off all these stats, and like, again, just watching the success, like you said, that he's had over the last 6 years in a row now. He's brought the Bruins to the playoffs. Like, all these stats that you put out there, what the team does year after year, like, they're in the playoffs. They're exciting to watch for the most part every year. Like, you can't really, again, from an outside, like, looking in, you can't sit there and you go, okay, well, like, I'm trying to figure out how I want to word this. Like, it just doesn't seem like Bruce Cassidy did anything wrong from like like I said, outside source looking in. Like, you look at all the success he's had and you sit there and go, I have 60 straight years in the playoffs and all these good stats. Like, yeah, coaches run dry, but like, I feel like at those times you have to, like, there's some sort of slippage, maybe like, okay, these numbers start going down a little bit, or they don't make the playoffs maybe a year or two in a row, or they have a 10+ game losing streak during the season that like makes it seem like, okay, maybe firing him wasn't the worst decision. But no, it comes down to, like, again, just we've talked about it before, the roster construction, the drafting, it's been beat over the head. Like, I've always said it. Like the coach can only coach what he has in front of him. And again, it falls on to Don Sweeney year after year, giving you fourth line, third line, bottom, tier defenseman to play with. Again, Olmark was nice, but maybe spending a little bit too much money on a guy that's a backup goaltender. Like it's just, again, it goes down to roster. You have the stat in here that I'm sure you're going to get to in a second, because the draft stat about Trent Frederick and his production.
Let me tell you.
That's ridiculous. Like, again, that feeds into just the complete misses you've had in the draft. Because that's what I was going to ask you. Like, how many guys that they've drafted since Bruce Cassidy's been here? I tried to go and look it up. Like, guys that have actually given you some sort of impact on this team. And I was going to say, it's maybe 2 or 3 guys, and that's it. Like DeBrusk, Frederick, and I can't even remember who else was in those drafts.
There are a lot of factors that factor into that. Cassie kind of alluded it. If you're a good team, sometimes you don't have room for these young players to develop.
But like you said, not when you logjam them with crap.
Then you logjam them at times, which is part on Cassie. Cassie had been, hard on keeping certain young guys out of the line. I'm not giving them a super long leash, but it comes back to the drafting. Trent Frederick is the second most productive forward you have, or player in general, you have taken, forward. I don't know. I mixed up my words there. Second best forward you have drafted between 2015 and 2018. He has 23 points.
That's pathetic. Like,
most productive in that stretch is Jake DeBrusk, who you're probably going to trade by July 8th.
He probably won't be here.
He won't be here by the end of the draft unless I don't imagine so, unless he were to rescind his trade request because he really hated playing under Cassidy that much. And
that's the one thing I'm curious to see. Yep.
Jake DeBrusk, if Bergeron and or Krejci are not back and Cassidy's gone, I think he might still say, yeah, screw this. Because I think DeBrusk knows deep down, his agent knows that a lot of the reason for his production was him being pissed off after the deadline, wanting to, keep his trade value high to either, make himself a asset to the team and have fun, or just make himself a valuable trade asset if they were to do so. But he also played with Bergeron and Marchand, and when he struggled at times and lost his spot on the second line, he's playing with David Krejci. Like, that's enough to be successful.
Exactly. You're with enough guys.
For a long time.
Yep.
It's just like, it's so brutal how Don Sweeney just doesn't seem to realize that
he's the problem.
Given the players that Sweeney and Neely sign off on and expect Cassidy to do much with guys that aren't capable of doing much. The most egregious thing, and I'm not saying this is a slight on Bergie, we talked about this a bit, because Bergie wanted Foligno, but it comes back to Sweeney. Bergie probably wanted Foligno, if he were the GM, at a little bit of a lesser price. But
yeah,
I think
to help out with more.
I think it's very clear, and it was clear the day of, when they were reporting things and who was in on Nick Foligno, that Minnesota wanted him to play with his brother, Marcus, in Minnesota. And Sweeney was like, no, we need this guy. Bergie wants him, whatever. We think he can contribute. Let's give him $3.8 million. And then he goes and scores 2 goals. One of his very few points was on the first night of the season. Yeah. Not good enough.
Yep.
And now he's complaining about his ice time. Dude, I really thought this guy had a good head on his shoulders and realized what he was, but he just doesn't. I've pretty much lost full respect for Nick Foligno, because these complaints about ice time when you're just not playing good. Being a solid defensive bottom 6 forward is not worth $3.8 million. Nope. Scoring 2 goals is definitely not. Being invisible for 80% of the regular season is not good enough.
Not going to cut it.
You think he would just maybe go with the motions, be like, hey, like, I'm not who I once was, and I'm making $3.8 million. Things aren't so bad. Dude, Nick Foligno is hardly good enough to make like $1.2 million.
Yeah, let alone.
He's hardly justifiable for $1 million. He is a brutal hockey player at this point in his career. And
he's close to a league minimum guy. Like,
he is a league minimum guy, but realistically, with how free agency works, he would get more than league minimum, due to his reputation, all that fucking hoopla, fucking bullshit. I had respect for Nick Foligno until these things came out. It's just like, you could be a locker room leader or whatever, but if you're complaining about your ice time when you're not playing good, like, you're just an idiot to me. That's really what it is. And I just like, I can't hold it in anymore. I just can't. It's brutal. And top of all these things, when you see this type of stuff coming out in the media, it's so brutal. And as we go back to coaching here, Evan Marinofsky was the first guy I saw tweeting these out. The coaching odds had Nate Lehman 4-1, Barry Trotz 5-1, Greg Carvel will never happen. He's not leaving UMass. 11-2. Pete DeBoer, no thanks, 11-2. Dave Tippett, no thanks, 7-1. Jeff Blashill, no thanks, 7-1. Jim Montgomery, 7-1, okay, but like not super thrilled if they hire him. Mark Savard, 7-1. I'd be very cool with that. Travis Green, fuck no. John Tortorella, fuck no.
That would be the one thing that makes this worse, in all honesty. If they bring in Tortorella, like if you want to just completely say F it to the season and the fan base, like
that would be the funniest outcome because they, there's apparently these concerns about how Cassidy handled things with young players. John Tortorella,
he's worse.
If it were legal, would take a steel toe boot to a rookie's jaw.
Yep.
If he could. Like, there are times where it's been up and like he just doesn't give a shit about young players. He's very willing to put them under the bus or, scratch them. And he's not friendly to the media. Like, that would be a disaster. Like, these coaches practically all suck. Like, for the most part. It's so
even the last two, I think I cut you off. I don't know if you got them off, but especially the last, like Mike Babcock, I throw into that category of Tortorella too, like another like dumpster fire waiting to happen.
I'll lose my mind if Mike Babcock is the head coach of this team next year. I will have to be admitted.
It wouldn't be fun. Like it would be like I said, a dumpster fire. And the thing I wanted to bring up really quick is it's something that with what's come out about Foligno. I'm sure we're going to get to the Twitter stuff and Bruce Cassidy's kind of his exit meeting and the comments that he made. And Ty Anderson did a good job on Twitter bringing it all up. But one of the things that stood out to me is something like I talked about earlier was we've talked about before about, and you mentioned it a minute ago, Bruce Cassidy's stuff with younger players, calling guys out in the media. And he was asked about that, if management ever approached him. And he said that Cam Neely went to him at one point and told him to be careful with that. So like, I hear that comment. Then the stuff about Foligno comes out about bitching about his ice time, like you said, that he didn't deserve because he played like crap. Like I see those two things and I go, okay, good. So with all the questions you have about this team moving forward, now this team is apparently soft too, with guys complaining about ice time. It shouldn't be. And again, you Cam Neely's telling your head coach, let's maybe tone it down a little bit with, the calling guys out in the media. Cause there might be some guys like, so other than what, like Bergeron, Marchand, and McAvoy, and maybe Pasternak, like those are the only four guys you can maybe count on to have a spine a little bit and not bitch and complain about this stuff that goes on. Like that's kind of where I'm at with this team right now. Among all this other stuff, now you have to worry about like if you have one of the softer teams that can't handle a little bit of criticism in the league. Like it's just again, it's just piling on this terrible aura around this team right now.
Yeah, I mean Mike Riley was rightfully not super happy when they got Lindholm, but that's a little pouty. Anton Bleed is the one I can justify because Anton Bleed absolutely belonged in the lineup.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I forgot about
Tomas Nosek. And now you're going to lose him, which isn't the end of the world because it's a fourth line forward who is making.
I would like to see him out there more than Foligno and Nosek, and I know different position, but
especially when you're losing a top left wing for part of the season. I wouldn't hate Anton Bleed staying for a year and playing on the fourth line.
He'd be a perfect depth guy.
But at this point, someone will give him a fourth line role. I'm faithful in saying that. I think he's worthy of it, and I think anybody that is willing to give Anton Bleed a chance will get benefit out of it because the guy is a fucking maniac, and he's clearly going to have a chip on his shoulder now for whoever team signs him. So I hope he proves the Bruins wrong, honestly, at this point, because Anton Bleed's the guy that's been here for a while and has earned a shot and didn't get it when he should have, particularly in the later portion of the season. Bergeron threw cold water on the speculation that he wasn't a fan of Cassidy, translated from French. He said, it's completely unfounded, so I won't put any energy into it. It's a waste of time, and it's really stupid speculation from, Stéphane Cadoret of the Quebec and Montreal Journals. So that puts any kibosh on that you might have needed. Will he want to come back, given the lack of Bruce and the uncertainty around the team? Will Pasternak's decision factor into things? Will they kind of coalesce here and they have effect on one another? Will DeBrusk's future depend on what happens with Bergeron and or Krejci down the middle? Will it depend on Pasternak? Will it depend on, the injuries? Does he want to be around this team? There are so many questions where to the
It's a
point
huge
where I
problem.
think I could actually put myself in a coma thinking about
All the
trying to sort it
possibilities
all out.
and yeah.
It's brutal, and it's gone to the point where it's almost a complete disaster. And I don't say it's a complete disaster yet, because a complete disaster would be Bergeron retiring, Krejci not coming back, and Pasternak not wanting to sign, so you have to trade him. That is a complete disaster scenario.
I think all those things follow one another if that happens. Like
Mm-hmm.
I 100% feel like if with Cassidy gone now, you don't know how the players feel about it, because you're never going to get the truth on it. But with him gone, if Bergeron retires, like you said, I've said it on record, I don't think Krejci's coming back. So once Bergeron goes, I think then you're finally going to get the true report, because it's all speculation right now about Pasternak or if he wants to play for Don Sweeney. I know that rumors come out there. I think that you'll finally see it then, that he'll request a trade, or there'll be something along the lines of like, well, the Bruins are officially shopping David Pastrnak, because I think, Bergeron not coming back is the doomsday just type of scenario.
Yeah, there's been speculation on Pastrnak too, outside of the text Fluter Shinzawa, through someone close to Pastrnak saying he won't play for Sweeney.
Mm-hmm.
There's been speculation, which I can totally get behind and could see being true, of Pastrnak not being a fan of how things were handled with David Krejci, how things were handled with Torrey Krug, which, we knew the season going into Torrey Krug's contract year, they pulled the offer off in fucking July, which is ridiculous to look in retrospect. And even in the present, when Krug signed with the Blues, was a little ridiculous, even though, the Krug contract in the moment and even now wasn't the sexiest contract for the Bruins to have signed, but the handling of things was pretty poor, I'd say. Back to Pastrnak, I think, maybe a lot of people aren't thinking this way. I think it's easy to imagine an extravagant return in a Pastrnak trade, but I feel as if most like hypothetical and, some of them become real things. Large NHL trades like the Eichel trade is the most recent example. Never quite what we expect. And, that's because hypothetical trades are pretty hard to predict more often than not. But so I think any return the Bruins would get is almost undoubtedly going to be underwhelming. So that's just where we're at. If it gets to the point where Pastrnak needs to be traded, he's not willing to sign the extension, and you want to move him before the draft, which would have to be a fast turnaround, and ideally you'd be getting the second overall pick from New Jersey and more. But my thought process is I'm leaning towards Pastrnak being willing to sign. There's no indication really outside of maybe the thing from Fluto's article of him wanting out. I mean, the guy was freaking drinking and partying with Hampus Lindholm like 5 days ago. Like,
everything seems okay.
New teammate
on the surface.
I think he's okay. So I'm not super worried about that. But, if Pastrnak isn't willing to re-sign long term, and you're worried about him, potentially walking for nothing, do you want to trade him now, or do you want to trade him at the deadline? I think you want to trade him now, given the uncertainty of the team and the draft assets you can get now and beyond. My gut feeling is that he does stay, though. He signs for 8 years, probably around 9 to 10 million, maybe more. My idea of a rebuild, if needed this season, is trading Foligno, Smith, Nosek, and Riley before the deadline, with DeBrusk being moved before the season. Riley might be a little tougher with this injury now, but I think ideally by the deadline, Mike Riley is gone, because you can afford to move him. Quick ideal scenarios for a Pastrnak trade, just for speculation's sake. I'm in the camp of many people where I think, even though you're trading him in the Eastern Conference, trading him for the number 2 pick and more would be very.
You can swallow
business.
that, I think. Yeah.
Yep. Get Slafkovsky or Cooley. Cooley thought of as the most dynamic player in the draft by most people, by center or wing. Slafkovsky, this big 6'4", 218-pound dominant winger who can play winger and center, would be cool with either of them. I think then you get like a 2023 second. I don't know if New Jersey would give up 2 firsts, since they're probably going to be bad again this year. So maybe they don't want to give up 2 high-profile first-round picks. Then you get like a mid-round pick, like a 3rd or 4th, maybe both years in 23, 24. Then you get Dawson Mercer and Alex Holtz, because I think, like I said, trades end up being less valuable than we, in terms of what we expect before than what happens. David Pastrnak is a 26-year-old 40 to 50 goal scorer. Like, you should get a shit ton for him. And ideally, you get the number 2 pick, take Slafkovsky or Cooley, second round pick, Dawson Mercer, and Alex Holt. That's a pretty good return for David Pastrnak. Is it perfect? We don't know. You know, these guys need to develop, but it's a pretty damn good package. It gives you a legit center prospect who's established himself well in Mercer. Logan Cooley, who'd be pretty damn good. Slafkovsky, whether he plays the wing or the center, could be pretty damn good. And Alexander Holt gives you a top flight sniper prospect, first rounder that can be very good and kind of fill the void for Pastrnak and go hand in hand with his buddy Fabian Lysell. They know each other both from Sweden, played some hockey together in the past. Otherwise, another fit for me is LA. LA's got tons of prospects. They can afford to move the 19th pick for the right guy. I think they're looking for a scoring depth winger. Of course, Pastrnak would be top line. You get the 19th pick, you draft maybe a guy, if Marco Kasper falls, you get Brad Lambert, go for the value, Marashnichenko, any other first-round player would be cool. Then, in this case, since it's not the number 2 pick, I think you get their 2023 first as well, the 2023 second, then a 2024 pick, and then Quentin Byfield at the very, very minimum. This might seem like a lot to people, and then Arthur Kaliev or some additional piece. I think David Pastrnak should just get you a ridiculous amount, a completely ridiculous amount. And people probably think I'm crazy for suggesting these things, but I think players like David Pastrnak should return a ridiculous amount. And now we have the idea with Chicago of them particularly or potentially shopping Alistair Brinkett, who's at the top of Frank Saravalli's trade bait list. You maybe, you know, if you need to move Pastrnak, you do a deal centered around Pastrnak into Brinkett, who should have been a Bruin, but they took Trent Frederick instead, even though they expected him to be a third liner. But that is apparently better than Alistair Brinkett because he's small, and now Alistair Brinkett scores 40 goals a year, so that sucks.
Well, the Bruins need big, tough guys. Don't you know that?
Let me tell you, if there's a good center move that hopefully won't cost a lot, with Chicago looking to tear things down, Kirby Dach, who is reportedly available as a 2020 third-round pick, third overall pick, rather, is potentially available. And if you can get him for the right price, that is a potential top 6 center. A kid with great size, great puck handling, love the player. If they could mold him into the right guy, I think that really helps your idea of getting a top flight center to eventually replace Bergeron. But there's no indication they're in on that. So just some quick speculation there. As you know, it's hard to avoid some speculation with everything going on. But back to things, do we want to get back to Cassidy's comments? I think we do.
Sure. I think that's where kind of the meat and potatoes of everything goes.
We've gotten to a little bit, but there are other comments from Cassidy in particular. You know, Sweeney's a drone. So like we can kind of just like, we've kind of touched on the things he's fucked up on, and you know, we haven't mentioned how Ty Anderson drilled him, rightfully so, and Sweeney kind of fumbled his words at one point because he didn't know what to say, and he kind of thought of something on the fly because he's in the scapegoat mindset. He got his scapegoat on Neely's birthday. They were probably celebrating together. Fucking brutal. Cassidy's comments just stick out way more at this point, though.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you.
Sweeney's things, we touched on it a little bit. Cassidy's comments in a press conference that he organized to thank the media and kind of give his side of the story are way more prevalent. Way more.
Well, that's what I was curious to how the hell he was even doing. I've heard that because I was listening to Zolak and Bertrand, and they said that apparently Bruce Cassidy is speaking today, which I was like, how is he doing that with no? I mean, I don't know if his Bruins credentials have been obviously taken, or whatever the hell the process is, but I'm like, how is he holding a press conference when he isn't really employed by? So yeah, kudos to him for just kind of jumping on and doing that. To me, I kind of felt like it was, I don't want to say like a saving face type of thing, because I can't imagine the league looked at him poorly after this firing across the league. But I know there were some people that were discussing like, oh, maybe is he doing this because of what Don Sweeney said, and he wants to get out in front and kind of maybe put the blame back on the Bruins for how he was treated, and just kind of, again, not, I think save face is too strong of a word, but you know what I'm getting at. Like, obviously there have been other teams that have been in contact with him. I think what was one of the reports was the Flyers have already checked in on him. So maybe this is just his way of, you know, obviously putting his name out there to be like, the problems did not stem from me. So
in the nicest way possible.
Exactly. Yeah.
Class. He took some digs, but he did it. He could have been a lot more boisterous about it. That's all.
Absolutely. Yeah. He could have. Because, I mean, I figured he was going to come out guns blazing at me. You heard of the day, I think the day he was fired.
If he really wanted to. He's not under contract anymore.
That's what I mean. I figured he was going to, because the day he got fired, obviously the report came out. I can't remember who had the text to him or asked him if he was going to comment on it. And he said, not at the moment, because it still like basically hurt too much.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, whenever he's going to speak, he's going to rip the Bruins a new one, which he rightfully should. But again, kudos to him for taking the much higher road than I think you and I maybe expected him to. Because like you said, he's not employed by the Bruins anymore. Like at this point, he's just hoping to get another job with somebody. And I think you said it earlier, a team would be stupid not to give him some sort of coaching capacity for their team. I think 100% he should be head coaching somebody going into next season.
My sense, I think this is a popular belief, and this is kind of where my mind went at the day it happened. My first thought was Detroit, because I think Detroit is,
I love him in the division.
Maybe looking for a guy different than Cassidy or Trotz, but the pure pedigree of these guys is worth exploring if you can find a style and a plan that works with guys like Moritz Seider, Lucas Raymond, Dylan Larkin, this young wave of players, Simon Edmondson, who I think we might see this year. Detroit's got a really exciting group of young players, and Cassidy could have a lot of fun working with those guys and turning Detroit into a playoff team again. And we saw Detroit, when we were much younger, be so dominant. And, even when we were more towards like middle school, high school age, when they were, competing for the Stanley Cup, they want to get back to there. And I think Bruce Cassidy or Barry Trotz could really help them do so. Steve Yzerman is a fucking genius. Like, guy was an incredible hockey player, and now he's like got a really good handle on things. I think personally, real quick, he's going to hire one of his old buddies from Tampa and pluck one of their assistants, because he was with Tampa before he left for Detroit. So I think that's going to happen almost undoubtedly, but they are in the mix on Cassidy, are expected to be. So we'll see what happens there. Let's just run through these, though. I don't think you have much of a team if players aren't held accountable. I agree. Yep. The Bruin is basically tattooed on me. That's the difficult part. I feel like I did my job. We can always get better. We can always be better. 19 still bothers me to this day. Same dude. Do I still want to be here?
Feels the same way.
He said, whether he'll coach or not, if a team comes calling, he said, absolutely, this is what I do. If he's been scapegoated, I don't know. You guys will have to determine that. In brackets, yes. I mean, I have to imagine.
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
Like, how can he not? This is a good thing too. Like, back to what tying in what Ty said. He said the other day on Twitter, one thing I thought was key about Cassidy today, and we kind of talked about this a little earlier, on developing young players, parentheses, big key for Bees management. He noted that win now teams have a tough time sticking with them. Also worth noting that Cassidy signed 5 veteran UFAs on day 1 last year, basically eliminating any job for any rookie.
Pretty much.
He's fucking right.
Again,
right. Like, it's so brutal. It
can only coach what you're given.
Brutal boss job.
When you're given crap,
I can't think of a single screw job worse in any sport that I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. This is fucking brutal. And I've seen fans from different sides of the fucking sports world and media. Everybody agrees with us.
Yeah, there's not one person, I said that earlier, not one person defending Don Sweeney. Like, I found it interesting that people, I can't remember if Ty Anderson was one of them, but basically, like, there was some people saying that, Bruce Cassidy, he was never going to, coach out his career as, finish his career as a Bruin. He was probably going to get, either step down or something at some point. Like, no coach really coaches out their entire tenure. Like, you know what I'm getting at here? Like, he wasn't, not that he wasn't going to be a Bruin for long, but like, obviously there was a time was going to come where he was probably going to get fired. If the production dipped or something, or there was more of a reason to fire him, that was probably going to come. But just like we've kind of hit the nail on the head here with how this situation has been handled and how much of a crap job it's been. And like you said multiple times, it's just a saving face for Sweeney and Neely. Like, just everyone's consensus is how this is handled has been completely wrong. Like, it's not, again, I keep going back to it. It's not that Bruce Cassidy really did anything wrong last season. He took I don't want to see a mediocre team, but like, this was, let's be honest, this wasn't one of the better Bruins teams over the last couple of years that we've watched it. Like, I don't want to say this was a team that was lucky to make the playoffs, but I'll 100% say this was a Bruins team that was lucky to make a game 7 in the playoffs. Like, I don't think they definitely shouldn't have been there. So I think, again, that goes back to Cassidy being able to coach up the crap that he had by the end of the season. And again, the fact that you just shit can him for the Bruins or for Don Sweeney's own negligence to help, build a better team. And like you said, maybe give some younger guys a chance that could help you down the stretch. Like, it's just ridiculous. It's
just so ridiculous too. Like, he will never directly acknowledge how, like, they had this stretch where Eric Hallow was playing good. Foligno and Nosek were doing jack shit, but like Forbert showed up in the playoffs. Like, whatever, you could pick apart like the new guys they brought in free agency last year. And then Eric Hallow disappears. Craig Smith, who you brought in recently, disappears. That's just like, that's another thing that supports Cassidy. Like, what are these guys doing? Cassidy can do all he wants to coach them up stylistically and keep them in the game, but it comes down to them for execution.
Yeah, absolutely. You can only switch up the lines debatable. And pick guys in and out of the lineup left so many times before you just sit there and you just shake your head and say, what else am I supposed to do here? I'm not getting any production from guys that aren't going to produce to begin with.
Yeah, I think like at times, they pan to him and like during games, like I think you could see the frustration from Cassidy at times, like whether it's a penalty or a missed scoring chance or whatever.
Can't say I blame him. Like, you have to think the season took a toll on him at some point, just being like, well, I have nothing outside of my top 4 or 5 guys. Like, the talent drop off is just
proven guys. Like, you signed guys in Foligno, Nosek, and Howell in particular that have shown glimpses. Foligno more so 4 fucking years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, it's the Backes situation all over again. Like, you're signing these veteran guys that are kind of
luckily
on the cusp of past their prime.
But like Nosek, the one was weird because like as a 4th liner in the past, once he got over the hump, they took him in the expansion drafts. He plays pretty well in Vegas, after being an AHL guy early in his career in Detroit. And like he was scoring some goals. He was putting up some points on the 4th line. So I understand signing him. But after January 2nd, it just wasn't there. He contributed a little bit. He's going to face-offs through the majority of the season. But there wasn't a real reason, like a sturdy sample size of, like, Nosek's going to be this dominant 4th liner all year. And it's just like, things didn't work out the year before. So they said, let's retool things. And I don't think they focused on the players enough. They focused on who they could get, where they could plug them in, what their roles would be, not enough of what they could do as players.
Yep.
And that's what it came down to. Eric Howlett disappeared. Craig Smith fucking disappeared. Thomas Nosek didn't fucking score a goal since the new year.
That's bad.
Nick Foligno scored 2 fucking goals, and this is so expected for a guy you're overpaying and a guy whose offense has declined every year for the past 4 years and has practically just been a defensive 4th liner that you really could have signed for $1 million if you didn't want to outbid their fucking brothers team in Minnesota for $3.8 million.
That's ridiculous. It gets worse every time you say it. Like, the Hollow thing, though, is the big thing for me, too. It's like, we said it all year. We're like, all right, this is a nice little run he's been on as a 2nd-line center, but at some point he's going to turn back into the guy that he is. And at the worst possible time, I think we said it during the playoff run, like, you're getting what you expected out of him at this point. He's not a top 6 player. Like, and again, like you said, it just goes back into just failing to get the right personnel in here.
And like, I had faith in Howell. I did in the playoffs, but there was of course, the thought in the back of my mind, is this sustainable for him? I had that doubt. And it's just, oh man, it's absolutely brutal to think of all the things that went wrong in retrospect. And, in the moment you had your doubts, whatever, but it's just such a brutal botch job. I mean,
from start to finish, in all honesty.
It's so funny too, like the comments Ty made that he published in this whole screenshot, of the Bruins played well without Lindholm and McAvoy enough to keep the series interesting, and then almost beat Carolina in Game 7. Maybe if they scored a little bit earlier on, they wouldn't have had to rely on a Pastrnak with 20 and a half seconds left
to make it interesting. Yep.
And Cassidy or Sweeney acknowledged, somewhat, if they made it to the second round, they wouldn't be having this conversation. Like, dude, highlight your incompetence a little more.
Exactly. Yep.
Like,
just keep hitting the nail on the head that you don't know what you're doing.
Thin of a line, like maybe to some people it isn't because it's a huge difference going to the second round and the first round.
Mm-hmm.
It's all coming up just a massive L, like a collective L.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I've seen some people throw the idea out, like, Sweeney doesn't have his extension yet. Is there a guarantee that he's even around? Maybe they fucking change their mind again. They do this move, and
I doubt it.
Sweeney, they end up firing Cassidy after, giving him the faith that he would be the head coach. And then Neely in a week from now could be like, all right, done. We've decided and I have authority. Like, you're fucking out too. Like,
that'd be such an epic troll job. That would be the one thing to save Cam Neely is if you waited this long and then it'd be so funny. Yep. You feel for Sweeney as the person if that happens, but you don't feel bad about Sweeney the GM if that happens.
I really don't feel. I do and I don't. It's just there's so much. That's
what I mean.
Things it like puts my brain in an actual blender.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's
a rough time to be
it's so established to have things go catastrophically bad so quickly.
Mm-hmm. That's what I mean. You picked the wrong off season with, like we talked about so many times just in this episode alone. Just so many questions. Now you have to add another one on top. Just the worst possible timing to do that.
Yeah, like this Bruins segment is practically like a brain buster. Like for people listening.
Good luck trying to figure out.
There's
what
no
the hell's
perfect
going on.
way to explain this. There just isn't.
That's what I mean. You can't find one justifiable thing to fire Bruce Cassidy. Like, name one thing he did wrong. Like, and again, like you said it earlier, the comment about, if we went a round or two further, that, we wouldn't be having this conversation, being that coming from Don Sweeney, obviously. Like, okay, so again, like you said, that just proves that basically what that is if this guy took my shit that I gave him and was able to produce anything out of it, then like we wouldn't have to fire the guy. And again, just comes down to, like you said, the incompetence of Sweeney.
And when we first talked about the idea of potentially firing Cassidy, one thing for me, and I'm not leaving this on Cassidy a ton, is outside of 2019, which they still didn't get things done. They've underachieved and they have not played super well all the time in the biggest moments. That's been a thing for a few years now. That's a reason to, have some skepticism for Cassidy, and I understand that. But it comes down to a point like Game 7 this year, you couldn't score enough. You couldn't develop enough pressure consistently. Carolina was breaking the puck out super easily, getting through transition too easily at times. 2019, you don't score until the fucking final 2 minutes. So you can't really put that on Cassidy. Like 2020, you just fucking lost. You didn't have Tuukka because he had to leave the bubble. You had fucking Halak. He wasn't good enough. You lost in 2 OT to a team that's better than you and won the cup.
It was a wonky situation to begin with in the bubble to start. Like,
yeah, and the Islanders series, like you had Carlo get hurt. Like, you just weren't meant to beat the Islanders. You weren't meant. They weren't meant to. They could have, but it just kind of felt like with all the factors that came through in the end in retrospect, they weren't meant to win that series. And you can blame part of that on Cassidy, but it comes more down to roster construction, and that's not up for debate.
Yep.
It is because we're debating it, but like I'm talking about if anybody feels the other way, you can't exonerate Sweeney of things here. You just can't. No. It comes back to roster construction, and it comes back to not getting enough from your draft picks.
Yep. It's basically it.
Part of that cleared. Is, you didn't have Zaboral this year, so maybe you would have gotten more from him.
Yep.
DeBrusk has been streaky for a large portion of his career. You haven't got much from the 2016 draft outside of McAvoy and Frederick. And Frederick, has been fine, but has had some quarrels. McAvoy's been fucking fantastic. 2017, you draft Studnicka, who has done pretty much jack shit and looks like a baby deer out there. And otherwise, not much. 2018, you really haven't gotten much out of the 2018 draft at all. If anything, I'd have to fucking look at it. Like, that draft has become so irrelevant to me at this point that I don't even remember.
I looked it up last night because I was just curious. You want to know the the 5 picks the Bruins had? I'll run through them quickly.
I remember now. Oh man.
Second round, 57th overall was Axel Anderson. Third round, 77th overall was was Jacob Lauko. Fourth round, 119th overall was Curtis Hall. Yep. Sixth round, 181 was Dustin McFall, whoever that is.
McPhail. I think it's pronounced McPhail. I like him, but he's probably not going to do anything in the NHL level.
All right, and then
Pavel Shen is playing in Russia for the rest of his career, as far as we know. So great 2018 draft. 2019 draft, you're hoping on John Beecher maybe, and whatever else. 2020, 2021 drafts have been fine, early returns. So we'll see what happens with those. There's not a whole lot to analyze there yet, but some good early signs. Don Sweeney fucked this up. Ken Neely fucked this up.
Did.
They had to save their jobs, and they did. That's what it comes down to. That's really it. When it comes down to the most basic sense of things. There's so much we can talk about. There's so much we have talked about. There's so much brain jumbling. We'll talk about this, I'm sure, more as this offseason goes on, and even the season when that starts.
Yeah.
We could go on and on about certain scenarios and certain things that have happened that could happen for 4 fucking hours. We're not going to do that. We're just not. What a brutal display of incompetence this has been. It's not acceptable. It's just not, especially for a team that has this established reputation of success. But before we get into some quick notes, before we wrap up the show, they did make a signing. Kai Wisman.
Hooray.
From Germany, played for Germany in the World Championships. 6'4", 207, right shot defenseman, fairly young. Don't hate it. Led the the German league, in plus minus, which is, a stat we don't buy into too much, but it's nice to see in this type of, basic situation. They lose Tyler Lewington to some fucking European league. They replace him with this guy who's younger and probably better. So he's a depth guy.
Bad.
We'll see how much he factors in. It's the Jesper Frodin of the year. They signed Jesper Frodin based off his SHL production last year. And of course, I think factors in his World Championship production last year. We played pretty good for Team Sweden. This is a similar situation, just a defenseman for me. Kai Wisman, good defenseman with size. It kind of, you traded for Josh Brown, you replace him, or you're probably going to let go with a younger, big player, good puck mover from what I can see, like good enough skater for a big guy. I like it. I'm willing to see what this guy can bring, and maybe he ends up contributing a little bit. Quick playoff thoughts. The Oilers felt like a team of destiny a little bit, but lose in tough fashion. Damn it, that's just how they go out these past few years. It sucks for our boy Ben and that team, but the Avalanche are just too good, man. They figured out a formula. McDavid and Draisaitl had their moments. Draisaitl playing a high angle sprain still, but it just wasn't enough. They weren't good enough. I gave them more credit, but honestly, I'm not totally surprised they got swept. A little surprised, but it just wasn't meant to be. Colorado, of course, it's like clue to at the beginning of the playoffs. Of course, they're going to win the cup, potentially, at least at this point. Tampa might have something to say when I don't pick them. I pick the Panthers and Calgary. It just makes perfect sense if they win the cup this year when I don't pick them. It's pretty perfect that Evander Kane, given how bad of a person he is, his potential last game with the Oilers ended the way it did, with him suspended for being a scumbag and burying a guy who used to hate, and now some Calgary mates might still hate a little bit. Might be his last
tough.
game as an Oiler.
1A, 1B when it comes to hating for those two.
Pretty much, but I'm much more on the Evander Kane side of things at this point. I've gained some respect for Kadri.
Yeah.
With on ice and off ice things, I think he's kind of changed his ways. I don't think it's like a fluke type thing. Yeah, we feel for our guy Ben. Unfortunately, the Oilers season had to end for him. He's been a rallying part of that team, and they've really embraced him. So we wish the best for Ben, and hopefully, with the season being over, he can enjoy the off season and enjoy himself, because it's a tough time, especially for a young kid being into a sports team they really love. Hopefully Ben can keep positive throughout the off season here, and still show some love for his Oilers, which he loves very much. Last thing, the Rangers just let the Lightning get back.
Yeah,
into
what
it.
the hell
Lightning
happened
are
in this
winning
series?
The Lightning are winning this series.
Mhm.
Like, I've gone so back and forth because I, of course, at the start thought the Rangers were going to lose in the first round. When they won the first 2 games, I was like, all right, there's no way they screw this up, even though I, stupidly doubted the Lightning. The Lightning bring it back. The Lightning are going to win the series now. I'm going back and forth.
Can't pick one.
Avalanche and Lightning. I think that was my prediction last year.
I think it might have been.
It's going to be a fun final. It's going to be a fun final because, I mean, the Rangers, I have a really hard time seeing them winning it at this point and going to the finals.
Yeah, I don't think
But
like you said,
they
they had their chance and kind of crapped on themselves 3 straight games. But I guess that comes with I feel like the inexperience. Tampa Bay is kind of the same thing we discussed when we talked about the Celtics and the Warriors to start and how we thought that series, this finals might go. It's kind of the same thing. Like the Lightning have all the experience in the world, it seems like, when it comes to this late in the season. Like they know what it takes to win on this stage, and it shows like they're doing that again this year.
Yeah, they lose some players last year. They replaced that whole third line.
Mm-hmm.
At this rate, now they're going to lose Andre Palat and potentially some other players and still make it to the fucking Cup Finals next year. Like, it wouldn't surprise me at all. They just know how to get it done. But I don't know. Maybe this is the year they run into a team too tough for them, because I can safely say that the Avalanche are a much better team than the Canadians were last year. So, I don't know. Maybe the Avalanche can defeat the beast, slay the beast. So,
let's hope.
That is going to wrap it up. Episode 98. Can't believe, every week we're getting so much closer to 100. That's going to be fun. But we'll be enjoying the Celtics, as I'm sure many of you listening have, if you're listening after the fact of this live recording or are currently. We'll see what happens there. Both pretty confident in the Celtics, but thank you so much for listening. The listenership continues to be pretty awesome. You can find us wherever you find your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Mike_Cratty and at Ryan_Salvaggio, plus the show account at Sal and Cratty Pod. Follow us at Salvaggio and Cratty on TikTok. And yeah, check us out wherever you find your podcast. You'll most likely be able to find us. Follow Full Press, all that stuff on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. Check out the Full Press Coverage app. And continue to listen. Check out some other stuff if you're into that. And stay safe, stay healthy, be nice to people, all that good stuff we usually preach at the end here, because this world is a crazy place, and it doesn't hurt to be nice to people and be positive impact. Enjoy the playoffs, Stanley Cup, NHL, that's fun with the Red Sox, whatever you're into. And we'll talk to you next week, episode 99. Well, Friday episode back to Wednesday, so short sample size in between now and then. And we'll see you next week. Peace out.